So I've always loved scary stuff, films, books, and games, but never believed in anything paranormal. I'll admit that I'd had some weird stuff happen, but I'd ignore it and shrug it off. I mean, there must be a rational explanation. But then, a few years ago, my friend wanted to do one of those paranormal ghost hunts that was taking place in our local area. I thought, you know what, why not? I've watched loads of TV ghost hunts and all that. It'll probably be fun. And it was for the most part. The building we went to had a really horrible history, but there was a big roaring fire and comfy seats, and the atmosphere was cozy rather than scary. They even fed us loads of tasty food as well. It felt like we had gathered around to tell scary stories. Honestly, I never felt frightened once. A couple of strange things happened, and a spirit box clearly said my name, but that definitely wasn't evidence of the paranormal. I put it down to coincidence. In the middle of the night, the investigators got a Ouija board out though and asked for some volunteers. My friend and another person in the group wanted to do it, so I decided to join too. It started spelling out words almost immediately too, and I didn't pay much attention to what it said because I was so focused on watching the other two to catch them out moving the pointer. I wasn't moving it, so obviously it had to be one of them. Except, I was paying such close attention that I realized that there were times only my finger was touching the pointer and it still moved. I didn't understand how and asked to look at the board at the end because I was convinced that there must be magnets or something on there. As soon as it was done, out of nowhere I realized I was really tired, just totally exhausted. One of the people in charge of the group, who said that he was a psychic, seemed really concerned, and I had to reassure him I just wasn't used to being up that hour. I'd been up since before 6 a.m. and it was now 4 a.m.-ish, so I just wanted my bed and chose to leave early. I got home, gave my dog some attention, and I went to sleep. But it was the next morning that I heard some weird noises that seemed to be coming from the door when I was in the bathroom. I thought it was quite weird, but I just sort of ignored it. Probably a draft or vibration from somewhere. I went into my bedroom and started getting dressed for the day. Heard my dog being silly on the other side of the bed behind me. He was a GSD and very big, so he was making quite a bit of noise. Sounded like he was digging under my bed, in fact. I turned around to talk to him and see what he was doing, and when I did, he wasn't there. I checked under the bed and all around the room, but nothing. In fact, my dog was downstairs the entire time. This actually freaked me out because I definitely know what I heard. Over the next couple of weeks, too, I checked for mice because, what else could it have been? This is when smaller things started to happen, though. From stuff like being certain I saw something move on the other side of the room in the corner of my eye, to strange noises. Sometimes things would just fall. A book falling off the table or a stack of plates clattering on the drying rack. I ignored a lot of this. Like, oh, I just heard a plate hit against another plate in the kitchen. Must be a draft in there or something. Other stuff, though, I really couldn't explain. Like, once, I was home alone and I just cleaned around the house and had been chilling on the sofa watching some TV, when I decided to get a drink or whatever. I walked into the kitchen and saw some fruit roll through the length of the counter. The fruit bowl is really tall and, there's no way any fruit would just jump out like that. It was only about a third of the way full as well. Nobody else was in the kitchen and really, I just could not explain that one. And then some things that happened were, just downright frightening. You see, I'd been home alone and I'd hear someone walking around upstairs. It was a different sound to the usual creaks, I know that much. More than once, I woke up to my dog standing in the doorway of my bedroom growling. He was never much of a growler, and that really terrified me. I would always go and check, expecting an intruder, but there was never anyone there. The worst thing by far, though, that happened was the last. It was a weekend morning, really bright and sunny. I woke up super early that morning, let my dog outside, and we went back up to bed. I had a coffee and a book, and I was just planning on chilling out for a bit. After a bit, my boy jumped off the bed and looked out of the bedroom doorway, then just sort of laid down, so I went back to my coffee and book. When out of nowhere, there was the loudest crash that came from the loft. I jumped, my dog jumped up, and then it sounded like something was falling down the loft staircase. There was noise of running up and down the stairs, and honestly, it was like all hell broke loose. I could have sworn, based on the noise, that there were at least 20 people up there just throwing things as hard as they could off the floor and the walls, kicking things and running around like crazy. I could hear things smashing, and it went on for a while as well. I was absolutely mortified and terrified, and I could have sworn that there were people up there. I heard running on the stairs but couldn't see anyone, and when it stopped, neither of us dared move. I didn't take my eyes off the stairs, and eventually I went up with my phone ready to call emergency services, but there was nobody there, and the weirdest thing was, it was nothing out of place. Honestly, I have no explanation for any of that. I shared this elsewhere, and someone reached out and told me to ignore it as best as I could and it would go away. And it did, and this was years ago. I'm in the same house though, and recently, I've had a few more weird experiences happen that has left me feeling unsure whether or not it's actually gone or not. I have read somewhere that weird experiences can restart any time, and that honestly really freaks me out. But has anyone else had a long break and things start up again? The stuff that happened before just doesn't even seem real to me, but I know what happened. I don't want it to come back, and if there's something that I can do, then honestly, please do share with me, because this is all just a bit too much. I'm sorry if this is a bit of a long one, but there have been a few strange happenings in my life in the past 24 hours, and I feel like there's a lot of background info needed for all of it to make any sense. So to begin, both of my parents are dead. I'm 24, female now, but my mum passed when I was 15 and my dad just 9 months later when I was 16. Mum passed in a car accident, and Dad, well, he ended his own life. My dad was a firefighter for most of his life, and both parents struggled with addiction. I'm not sure how relevant that is, but just so you have all of the info, I think it's worth knowing. So, here's where it really starts. I was standing in the corner of my kitchen this morning, huge open floor plan, so my back was to the rest of the apartment. I was making myself some breakfast when I hear what is distinctly a man taking a deep breath or a sigh. It sounded like it was right behind me, so I spun around. Obviously, nothing was there though. It's early morning, my cats were sleeping upstairs and wouldn't be able to make that noise regardless. No electronics were on at all because my roommate and I unplugged them last night due to a lot of thunderstorms in our city. My roommate was asleep and he sleeps with tape over his mouth. Don't ask, he's a mouth breather, so he couldn't have made the noise either. Not to mention that his room is on the other side of the kitchen, not behind me. I genuinely have no idea what could have made that noise other than some kind of an entity, really. After that, I finish getting ready and I go to work. I tell my co-workers what happened, and I started to kind of piece together some other things that have been going on lately and connect them a bit. For example, last night at work I got 2 phone calls within 5 minutes of each other, and both of them just said goodbye in a man's voice and hung up. My roommate also left a candle burning in the shared bathroom overnight, and my dad, the firefighter, spent my whole life drilling fire safety into my head. But yesterday, I was going through a bunch of my things and spring cleaning essentially, and ended up finding a few of my dad's things that I've never seen before. even though I've gone through these things dozens of times in the almost 8 years that he's been gone now. But I found a very cryptic note with things written on it like despair, pain, loneliness, darkness, etc. And at the bottom, my name was written and circled. I also found a cassette recorder with my dad's voice on it. I've been getting splitting headaches for the last 2 days too, when I normally don't get them at all. The noise itself sounded like it came from the corner directly behind me, and the only things there are a wax warmer and one of my dad's old bottles from his house, which has its own very creepy backstory. But lastly, to get to my apartment, you have to walk up a stairwell that has motion sensor lights. For the past couple of days, the light has been flickering just non-stop. So, all of that by itself, while still very alarming, could be kind of ignored. But then I get home from work today, open the door to the stairwell. The light is still flickering until I'm standing directly below it, because as soon as I get underneath it, it stops flickering and is working normally. I stood there for almost a full minute and took a video of it to show my roommate, and the second that I turned around to keep going up the stairs, it started to flicker again. I really don't know what to make of any of this or where to go from here, so any advice or thoughts as to all of this genuinely would be greatly appreciated. I'll preface this with a question. Do you ever get a sinking feeling of impending danger? Because I did, in the backwoods around Solomon Hill, Berkshire, UK. Just a feeling that the vibe of a place is completely rotten, when moments ago it was almost idyllic. So I got the weekend to myself, as my partner is away for a few days. Something that I like to do is go for night drives, and stop by somewhere in the sticks and go for a peaceful walk when not too many people are around. So I got in the car and put in the directions to a little car park in some woods about 10 miles away. As I drive down the motorway, the sun's very nearly set. It looked great, in fact, everything bathed in orange. I leave at the junction and the motorway becomes dual carriageway, which in turn becomes single B road. I turn off into the lane and pass through the last village before a nice bit of hilly conifer woodland looms large in the twilight. I was going here particularly because I heard that there was a nice viewpoint of Reading Town, but in the end, I don't make it that far. Now, I'm going up country tracks, single lane only, so I'll have to pull over to let someone past if they're going the other way. That doesn't happen. No one else is on the road, in fact. The hedgerows give way to the woodland. It's very pretty and I can still hear birdsong in the dying light. Eventually I reach the car park, although really it's just a patch of gravel for turning around, and a forestry commission gate blocks off the dirt track deeper into the woods. In the car park there's a motorhome, although it looks like no one's in it. There's also a dark blue Ford Fiesta EcoBoost with a fella in it on his phone. I park in the corner, behind the motorhome and 2 spaces over from the Ford and get out. There's a meadow across the road from the car park, so I walk to that to see if there's a path that may lead to the viewpoint. I've not been here before. No viewpoint, but there is a single deer, which was nice. After that, I cross over again and decide to use the track behind the forestry gate. Even if I don't find the viewpoint, it will be a really nice walk, I think, and begin walking. The man in the little car isn't on his phone anymore, and he gets out. I take a few more steps, but I'm already feeling a little bit creeped out, like a creeping dread is starting to shift in. I look over at the man. There's now a second man, and the pair of them are dressed in dark, practical clothes with boots. They're very tall. They don't say anything to each other. Their faces are made of stone, in fact. I've sort of stopped now. I pretend to be on my phone. I try not to look directly, but out of my peripheral I catch them taking turns to sneak looks at me. So I look at them directly, and one is just watching me as they walk towards the same path that I was about to head down. I just sort of stand there as they walk by, and they keep looking at me in alternation, even turning their heads as they're in front of me now to look at what I'm doing. They disappear behind some hedges, looking at me one more time before they go. That dread feeling, the rotten feeling, is very strong. I've had this danger feeling only twice before. One time the danger was perceived, the other time very immediate. At this point, I decide absolutely not, and I go straight back to my car and I get in. I can see the men again, and from the car I can see around the bushes, and they just sort of stood there, watching me. The entire time I got ready and drove out of the car park, turning onto the road, they just stood there, watching. Now, I hope that I was just being paranoid, but I think I know the difference deep down. Paranoia makes you jump at your own shadow and feel anxious. This feeling was cold and a solid feeling in my gut. You become hyper-aware of your surroundings, but also the object of your dread, and in this case, it was definitely these men. I just had a terrible feeling about them, unlike any other stranger that I'd come across. But what do you guys think? Was I overreacting, or does anyone else get the feeling that I'm talking about? Have you had it before, and if you have, where and when? Something about those men just wasn't right, and I'm really glad that I listened to my gut. This happened last summer when I, female and 18, was 17, went out with a friend, female and 19, at the time she was 18, for a stroll in the woods. We live near a big forest. So when leaving the forest, I kind of noticed that something was just off. So I turned back and there was a really tall guy, almost 2 meters, standing right behind me, only leaving a little bit of a gap between me and him. He looked very pale, had blue shorts and white stripes on and a dirty white top. He had pretty big and dark eye bags, blondish white hair, and looked like he was in his mid-20s if I had to guess. I instinctively took a step back, and my friend, out of panic, did the same. The guy stood still and asked us if we were interested in doing, well, you can probably guess, and if we were lesbians, and that he would have some nice friends at his place. My friend, thank God, told him friendly enough that we weren't interested, and the creep turned back without saying anything, and left the way that we took to get out of the woods and walked back in. We took separate ways to get home instantly because of both of us being creeped out. I told my older sister when I got home, and her face turned pale while I was telling her. She asked some questions about the guy, and she told me that this guy sounds like her stalker from school time. Apparently, this guy lived in a little village that was near the woods, and to this day, I've been way too scared to go into the woods there again, even if it is with my friends. I just hope that I never see this guy again in my life, and I also hope that he stays away from my sister. Many years back, I dated a man-child, relatively the same age as myself. We got along pretty well. He presented gentlemanly, hospitable, kind, and loving. In hindsight, things escalated quite quickly. We went from being friends to being exclusive within a month. Not enough time to truly know someone, I know that. This story is quite lengthy, and I'll do my best to shorten it without leaving out integral details. So please, do bear with me. We saw each other daily. We mostly hung out at his home. That was fine with me in the beginning, as I'm rather introverted anyway. A couple of months into our relationship, I started to question why we weren't leaving the house, why we weren't going out and experiencing new things and trying out new hobbies. His responses were always cloudy. He always tried to redirect the conversation, thinking that I was truly stupid and couldn't tell that this was an obvious avoidance tactic. That was the point where I started to become curious though, and from there it all went downhill. Now, I'm not an intrusive person by any means, but considering that he was my partner, I had a right to inquire as to why we were isolating ourselves like this. After some mild questioning for a few weeks, I noticed that he began to create distance. This noticeable change was hard to ignore, in fact, and pretty much confirmed my suspicions. However, I'm not going to make a decision based on assumptions. I'm ashamed to admit this too, but one night, while he was sleeping, I actually went through his phone. I still feel pretty disgusted, even though I found like 100% proof that I was the side chick. I couldn't believe it. I still can't. I was with this person daily, and it obviously confirmed why we were so confined to his home. But it was perplexing because she had no idea about me. It was about 2 a.m. when I looked through his phone. There was nowhere that I could sleep beside him for the remainder of the morning, so I quietly got out of bed, collected my things, and I went home. The next day, I believe that he realized what had happened. However, he never contacted me to see why I left. Things remained silent for the entire day, and then I received a phone call later that evening. I confronted him. Again, I'm ashamed to say that I did take photos of the evidence, as I knew that he would try to gaslight me. The fury in his voice, though, was palpable. He did what a usual abuser would do, and blamed me for going through his phone while totally ignoring his infidelity. It was utterly pathetic, really. He had created this delusion that I was going to contact the other girlfriend and tell her all of the wrongdoings, all of his infidelity, lying and cheating, etc. I would have done this. However, while I was looking through the phone, I realized that this girl was very sheltered. She was completely oblivious to what was going on, and I was afraid that he would retaliate against myself and her, and I thought to myself that eventually she would find out anyway. I do regret not informing her. However, my decision was my decision, and I can't change that. But this is where my nightmare begins. He was so paranoid and confident that I was going to contact his girlfriend that he would constantly call me daily and make vague threats against me. I persistently advised him that I would not contact her, that it was none of my business, that she would eventually find out that he was a deceitful, inept brainworm sooner or later anyway. All I wanted was for him to leave me alone and to never speak with me again. That was really my only request. He obviously didn't take my words well, and he continued to harass me. Only a few days later, things completely erupted. His paranoia exceeded levels that I'd never seen before. He sent me a threatening message with the context being, "I have compromising photos of you and I'll release them," as he believed that I would ruin his relationship. I couldn't believe the delusion. No matter what I said, no matter how I phrased it, I even had my mother speak with him at one point, but it was useless. I sent him a message stating that if this was true and if he messaged me again that I was going to call the cops. 5 minutes later, I received 11 messages in succession. A few were videos, photos, and personalized animations of myself. I had never seen these images or videos and animations before. These were taken without my consent. These were extremely intimate and compromising too. Unbeknownst to me, he had cameras set up all around his room. These weren't just threats. These were screenshots of these images, videos, and animations uploaded on various sharing sites. Luckily, he lacked intelligence. He sent me the evidence. There was nothing that I could do to stop the uploads, but I immediately went to the police. They did manage to take some down. However, there were no promises, as once a photo was uploaded, it could be immediately archived. This has forever altered my life too. I don't see relationships the same. I cannot be intimate. I can't form strong bonds. I've become apathetic. I'm forensically observant. I have difficulty trusting everyone, even my family, and so much more. In conclusion, the police were rather efficient and treated me very well, which I'm thankful for. I was granted an immediate protection order, family violence order as well. He broke that quite quickly and called my phone trying his best to apologize, begging me to drop the charges. He was so pathetic that he got his mother to ring me and tried to persuade me. I immediately called the police again and they took immediate action. This ended up going to court and I won. It's really not the result that I wanted. However, he did get his name on that good old sex offenders registry list, which is far more egregious than people may think. Nevertheless, this is beyond life-changing, and to all who may have gone through this, I'm really sorry for you and I feel your pain. Thanks for listening to my story. I know it's a bit long, but I hope that it was good and I hope you got something out of it. I guess the moral of this story is to be careful around people who you think you trust. I know that that's quite nihilistic and pessimistic, but these are some of the unfortunate aspects of life. It's quite paradoxical, I know. Humans are social creatures, but many humans, like this guy, are just absolute rats. So, to start this off, I was deployed to Kadena, AFB, late 2023. I was put into on-base lodging along with another body. After working my shift, I went straight to bed. I was asleep for a solid 4 hours until my roommate woke up to shower. I sleep kind of light, so it did wake me up. At this time, it was probably about 4 in the morning, after checking my phone. He apologized for waking me up, but I told him not to worry about it and to have a good day as he left. At this point, I shift my position and brought the covers over my shoulder. Then, shortly after, my blanket that had been over my shoulders was suddenly pulled back down. I was just about to fall asleep when that happened, so I was still fairly awake, but I ended up texting my buddy, who is an E6 tech sergeant, about what had happened, and he was freaked out for me too. He couldn't believe it, but he knew that I wasn't lying. I then called my wife, since she was awake in the States, to tell her my experience, and she didn't like it at all. She was sort of in disbelief, but also knew that I wouldn't lie about anything like this. I've heard stories about being here and it being haunted, but I never thought that I would ever experience anything like this. And it just had to be one of the freaky things that no one wants to experience, right? To those who have listened to the story, thanks for listening, and for those who have been stationed there, do you have any stories that you want to share? Because I would like to know your experience also, and know that I'm not alone. This was over 10 years ago, but I'll never forget it. So my friend, male and 18, and I, male and 17, would always hang out, either skateboarding, playing video games, and smoking weed. We were still young enough that we were hiding it from our parents, and would go out on walks or to nearby forests to smoke. One evening, it was about 6 p.m, and we decided that we would go to the nearby forest to have a smoke. This forest did have some walking paths, and a really cool man-made stair set that was embedded in the dirt of a really steep incline. There was even a long railing made accompanying the stairs. When we arrived at this stair set, it was about 7 p.m, and there was still lots of light left outside. We decided that we would sit at the top of the stairs for our smoking spot. We were chatting, smoking, having a good time just sort of hanging out. After we had smoked a bit, we remained sitting at the stair set, and we both got pretty quiet. Not for any particular reason, but suddenly I felt or heard this indescribable boom. It caught me off guard. However, what really scared me was the fact that this feeling or noise seemed to come from every direction, including from underneath the ground. I remained silent for a moment afterwards, absorbing what I had just experienced. I looked over at my friend and asked him if he felt anything too, trying to confirm if I was just high and imagining things. But he confirmed that he experienced it too, and at that, I felt my stomach drop a bit. As we were discussing the sound, we didn't notice that within about 5 minutes that the whole forest had been shrouded in fog, and it was beginning to get dark. This was pretty strange, we both thought. Considering what we had just experienced, but kind of played it off as my friend went to smoke again. Just before he went to light his bowl, though, there was this shrill or scream that shot through the forest. It sounded relatively distant, but close enough to make us freeze. The scream was long, high-pitched as if a woman had screamed, and echoed everywhere. Again, we heard the scream, and louder and more distinct this time. Finally, there was a third scream that tapered off, and then it just went dead silent. We were surrounded by fog, and it was getting darker and darker all of a sudden. And so at this point, we decided that that was enough. We got up, packed up, and we left, both being very uncomfortable with the series of events that had just taken place. We got out of the forest, which takes about 20 minutes or less, and when we did, there was no fog to be seen anywhere. In the following days, we played off the whole experience and didn't really talk about it too much, chalking it up to a weird experience at most. We ended up losing touch with each other later on, and we ended up getting back together several years later for his wedding. And it was then that I brought up the experience to him, and he remembered it just the same, and we both kind of laughed about it, I guess. It still gave me chills talking about it, and having the confirmation that we both experienced the same thing was very unnerving. But as much as the screams were strange, I'll never forget that boom and the feeling and the noise of it. It felt, I don't know, otherworldly. My entire life I've lived in haunted houses. When I was 6, we moved into this nice 6-bedroom house built in the 1900s in the suburbs. When we first moved in, we didn't make a lot of effort to clean out the 2 crawl spaces. We basically just moved more stuff in with it, really. My mum remembers lots of old dolls being in there, though. I wonder if there's an attachment to something left behind, because I never found much information about anyone who lived there. Anyway, it was me, my aunt, my mum, my dad, my grandpa, and my cousins living there. Through the kitchen was my grandfather's room. Through his room was the stairs to the attic, which was enclosed in an L shape. The attic had been converted into 3 bedrooms by this stage. The room at the top of the stairs, that was my room with the tiny door to the first crawl space. To the left was my aunt's room, which had another crawl space. To the right was my parents' room. And sleeping in that middle room was honestly hell on earth. It was really scary, and most of my friends wouldn't stay over because of the things that happened in my room. I thought that I was just having nightmares or something because I'd always see a shadow figure beside my bed. But that turned out to not be the case. So once I was playing school with my cat in my room, and it was getting hot, so the attic was very warm. I went into my aunt's closet with the cat because I was pretending that he was in detention. The door had no lock, but for some reason it just got jammed, and I couldn't get it open no matter how hard I tried. Me and my cat, we would have died in there for sure after a while because of the heat, but my grandpa came to the rescue and he let me out with no struggle. The rest of the house was bad too. I've been in plenty of haunted houses, but this house gave you a sense of, I don't know, like dread. It felt very menacing and evil. A lot of bad things were happening in my family at that house too. I always felt like the house fed off the negativity as well. My cousins would party and have 20 people in their room every night. My parents and my aunt fought about it a lot, and once I had to hide in my parents' room while my half-brother's mum tried to distract me because the party guests were threatening each other with guns outside. The basement, it was creepy too. My dad finished one side of it and turned it into a sort of home bar. My grandfather had antique statues of clowns down there, and we had a projector down there as well, and the PS2. I would sit down there sometimes and play games. Once the lights turned off on me, I would always run upstairs with this feeling of being chased. Eventually, my grandfather got sick and passed away when I was about 8. My dad needed my grandpa's safe code to take out important documents, and for some reason, all of the adults thought that it would be a good idea to basically do a séance in the attic to try to get the safe code, like ghosts can just spit out numbers like that. So my aunt, my mum and my dad and me took our voice recorder up there. My mum was a member of a local paranormal society at the time, so we ask all of our questions, hear nothing with our ears, and then we walk downstairs. We plug the recorder into our computer and listen through the recording, but we didn't hear anything besides ourselves until the part where we were going down the stairs. Then, through our terrible computer speaker, we all hear what sounded to my mum like a laugh and to me like wum wum in this deep demonic voice, almost like a pig or something. My mum then said, no more recording upstairs, okay? The only not terrifying experience I had there was feeling someone petting me really gently while laying on my grandfather's recliner. A year or two later, though, we got a dog. I was still sleeping with my mum, but at this point my dad was always at the bar and slept in the living room. Me and my mum were in her bed and my dog was chewing on a bone at one stage, when the cast iron 400-pound bed frame started shaking violently. My dog's bone flew onto the ground after the shaking started. We called the dog up to the headboard and she came up and laid between us. The bed was shaking for at least a good minute. My mum said that the bone must have caused it, but even then it just made no sense. Later, she admitted that she just didn't want me to be scared, and we checked online the day after and saw that there were no earthquakes in the area, and nothing else shook anyways, so that didn't make any sense. Just the bed. One night the door was opened between my parents' room and my room, and my mum said that she saw a shadow figure go from the stairs to the crawlspace door. Years later, my parents split and me and my mum moved out and my aunt stayed. Her boyfriend, who was basically my uncle, passed away sadly. My aunt adopted his kids and they live there still, but my blood cousins and my dad have moved out. I eventually went back to visit them after he passed, and he had renovated a lot of the attic, and it felt very different. A lot less heavy, I guess. The entire time that I lived there, I'd race up and down those stairs to my room, because I always felt chased. And my aunt asked me if I ever told them anything to scare them, and I said no and asked what she meant. I'm a good cousin after all. And then she said that both of the kids, they race up and down the stairs like I used to. A few months later, and my dad was thinking about this Komodo dragon print that he bought from some local photographer or whatever. He remembered that he left it in the crawl space, and he texted my aunt asking if she could find it. And when my aunt got to the top of the stairs, it was neatly placed next to the crawlspace door. Mind you, no one had read her text or know where to find it. Heck, she didn't even know where it was exactly. I think about that house still, and I have nightmares about it, and the entity that I am absolutely certain lived in it. I don't think anything as scary as what we went through has happened since at that house. And while I'm not a Christian by any means, if demons are real, then I am certain that that's what this is. It was in that house, for sure. This was in middle school. My teacher was absent one day, and this gym coach was substituting for him that day. I've seen him around the school before, and he has substituted for us a few times. I was sitting at my desk talking to my friend behind me and pretending to do my work, and for some reason, he decided to walk around the room to check if we were doing the assignment. So I turned to my desk and started writing. He goes one by one to everyone's desk, but slows down once he reaches mine. He hovers over me, just staring down at my work. I got a bit nervous because I didn't want him calling me out or anything, but for some reason, I felt his breath on me heavily, which was really grossing me out. He was a frail, old-looking guy, so honestly, I didn't think too much of it. He walked really slow and seemed harmless, but was sort of very passive-aggressive when he spoke to us. I'd always get this weird, sort of creepy vibe from him, but always thought that it was just me. Anyway, a few months go by, and the rumor of him being fired circled around the school. I was curious, so I'd ask around to know what the tea was. And apparently, the same teacher that would sub for my class was actually fired. He was caught trying to touch the girls during practice and throughout gym periods. He even touched a girl, which was soon reported by the student. And he even got caught hiding in the crack of the door trying to watch the girls change in the locker room. He would just sit there and try to watch them, apparently. He finally got caught while doing so, and he was soon fired and kicked out of the school. The news, it made it everywhere. Even on the news, it honestly spread like wildfire. Thinking back on it now, it gives me chills to think that he would watch girls change like that. And thank goodness that he got caught. I guess you just never know people's intentions after all. Unlike a lot of stories on here, I don't have any evidence, and most of the situations happen months, even years, apart. So, truthfully, I have no idea if they are really connected or not. I would love to know what you guys think might be going on though, because I'm starting to feel slightly, well, crazy, I guess. My first weird encounter happened when I was in elementary school. I can't remember what grade specifically, but I was definitely young. My older brother, Jay, and I invited our neighbors Mike and Pay over for a Friday sleepover. My parents ended up hitting the hay early that night, around 9 p.m., so the four of us decided to take advantage of the mainly unoccupied house and play an old game of hide-and-seek in the dark. For reference, I used to live in a one-story house that was built in the 70s, so the windows were really low and easy to look through if you tried to. My window in my bedroom, it was positioned on the side of the house, diagonal from a pesky streetlight that always seemed to perfectly shine into my window every single night. I didn't own curtains, but I did have blinds on my window, and I always kept them shut to try and help block out some of the light. Anyway, it was Mike's turn to count. My brother Jay, Pay, and I, we all decided to hide. I ended up shoving myself into my crowded and messy closet, which had one of those big folding doors. Because of the fact that my closet had 1,000,001 things in it, I didn't fit very well too. The door wasn't able to fully shut. At the time, I really didn't mind though, because it gave me a little bit of a slit between the door that I could peek through. 1 minute turned into 5 when everyone eventually got found, aside from me. Mike was starting to grow impatient, so he asked Jay and Pay to help him find me. That's when Pay, like the genius she is, ended up flinging my closet door open with an accomplished grin on her face. I don't remember much, other than me complaining that she was cheating, before my eyes drifted past her head and toward my bedroom window behind her. I remember my blood ran cold, because the silhouette of a man with a hand literally cupped to the window, as if he was trying to peek in, was enough to scare the ever-loving out of me. I screamed a blood-curdling scream, which only caused Pay to turn on her heels to try and see what had me so frightened. It took all but 3 mere seconds before her screams joined mine, and we both gripped onto each other and full-on sprinted into the living room. I nearly stumbled into my older brother's hands while my parents raced out of the bedroom. I ended up explaining to them through choked tears that there was a man outside of my window. My older brother and stepdad grabbed a flashlight and a knife and checked every perimeter outside. They even went as far as checking our surrounding neighbors' backyards and down the street too. But there was nothing. Nobody. Literally, the street was dead quiet. And, just as a side note, I remember very clearly that it was pouring down rain that night, so it would be incredibly hard for anyone to escape quickly without leaving sunken footsteps in the mud, and without the sound of heavy shoes slapping against wet earth. But fast forward many, many years, and at this point, I'm 19 years old and I end up moving in with my girlfriend and her family. Just to add in too, I know it doesn't typically mean much, but the feeling of being watched, always having unknown company hovering behind me, has been a feeling that I've felt for over a decade now. Sometimes I feel like it's just in my head and, I don't know, I'm just sort of psyching myself out. But other times, the feeling just feels so real. Like, I just cannot shake it. Like my body is trying to alert me that I'm not alone. And the more I ignore my body and its warnings, the louder it screams. Anyway, I'm 19 now, like I said, living with my girlfriend and her family. One night I decided that I absolutely needed a midnight snack. My girlfriend had already been knocked out of sleep along with her younger brother and her parents, so I went downstairs, clutching onto the collar of her American bulldog, because, just like so many times before, I felt the unease of not being alone. For reference, to get to the kitchen, you have to come eye to eye with their sliding glass door that leads to their backyard. And let me be clear too that I am 100% certain that that night the door was shut and locked. 10,000% certain of it, in fact. I ended up making myself a PB&J when a shiver literally racks through me. I ignore it, of course, and finish making my sandwich and clean up the mess that I made before turning around to head back upstairs. I end up turning just to stare at a half-open sliding glass door. Obviously, I immediately jumped into, oh my goodness, there's a human in the house right now. So I ran over to the door and shut it, and locked it before checking out the entire downstairs. But in the end, there wasn't a single soul other than me and the dog. I literally cannot explain how that happened. Even to this day, it fills me with a sense of just unease. When I woke up the next morning too, I asked my girlfriend's parents if they could have forgotten to lock the door. They stared at me with confused looks before reassuring me that they always double-check that all the doors are locked every single night. Now, this next situation happened maybe a few months later. My girlfriend and I decided to take a weekend trip back down to my hometown to visit some friends and family. Basically, we joined my one friend at a bonfire that was being hosted at her grandmother's house. To quickly explain it too, her grandmother lived on a pretty big plot of land in the middle of nowhere, where the only thing that's surrounding her are back roads, a cornfield, and a thick bundle of trees lining her backyard. Now, my girlfriend wanted to be silly, and decided to leave the bonfire and sprinted a little over 150 feet to lay on her back a few feet from the lining of the trees. My friend and I ended up just sort of staring at her, waiting for her to pull one of her stupid jokes, when we hear an utterly bone-chilling scream erupting from the forest. I have never seen my girlfriend get up and run so quickly. When she got back to us, she was shaking like a leaf with eyes wider than the moon itself. I've been with my girlfriend for 4 years and I've never known her to be a liar, and she swore on specific things that she loved that there was something that screamed at me just a few feet away in the trees. She said, though, that she didn't see anyone or hear anything else. It was just dead silent when all of a sudden the scream ripped through the air, and it sounded so terrifying that it even unnerved my friend's parents and grandma. This third situation happened not long ago. My girlfriend ended up having to work a 24-hour at the fire station, so it was just me, the little brother, and the parents at home. Just like the last time, my grumbling stomach kept me from being able to fall asleep that night. So with a sigh of defeat, I got up and went downstairs to grab some food. When I came back up, I was fiddling with trying to lock the puppy gate at the top of the stairs when I heard, in a deep gravelly whisper, someone whispering my name, sort of all drawn out. I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard it, and quickly set my plate of food on the ground so that I could pull my phone's flashlight up and shine it toward the other end of the hallway. And again, surprise, surprise, there was nothing and nobody. I was completely alone in a dead silent hallway, so there was zero chance of me mistaking the noise to be a TV or something, as there were no TVs or no noise whatsoever there. I did end up peeking my head into her parents' room and her little brother's room. They were all sound asleep, drool and all. I ended up texting my girlfriend about it that night because I just was completely freaked out. When I woke up the next morning, I read that she texted me freaking out at 6 a.m. because she was changing in the girls' bathroom at the fire station when she heard a whisper, and she explained that it sounded exactly like how mine did, and said hi to her all drawn out like. Honestly too, I cannot even explain what that means or what it could be, but it's safe to say that I'm never going to get midnight snacks alone ever again. Now, this final thing happened just a week ago. I didn't experience it myself, but my girlfriend did. So we were downstairs in the middle of the day talking to her mum. The hallway has the bathroom and the front door is connected to the kitchen, so if you stand in the middle of the kitchen, you can see perfectly down in. My girlfriend randomly lurched forward into the hallway and smacked the wall right next to the bathroom door. I turned around and gave her a sort of confused look because, well, there was nobody there. I watched as she peeked her head into the bathroom, looking like she was expecting someone to be there, when she quickly ducked back out and hurried back toward me. She explained that she turned around and saw the quick motion of a white sleeve or arm moving into the bathroom, as if her little brother quickly ducked into the bathroom to try and hide and scare her, and she ended up catching his sleeve in the action. Yet, her little brother was at school that day, and her father was in the living room with us. In other words, there was absolutely nobody else in the house other than us four, and everybody was accounted for. Like I said, I have no idea if these are all linked in some way, if there's something that's been following me since I was a child. I'm really not sure. I've never seen any figures myself, just have heard very unexplainable things that are definitely real. But I don't know. What do you guys think? I've always had bad luck with entities. I don't want them around by any means, but I've had more encounters than most. And a lot of them, they are just downright terrifying. Though this particular one was traumatizing to say the least. I'll try to keep this as short as I can, as I'd rather not give all the details. So, I was about 15 when I went with my two friends to an abandoned mental asylum. The oldest of us drove us there, and we got the pin from a friend of a friend. I tried to look up where it was located, hoping to find some history, and this place apparently didn't exist according to Google. So I was a bit nervous and had a bit of a bad feeling about this one. We drive down this overgrown dirt road at one point and see a very large building. We enter and there's a lot of medical equipment and beds were still there. We headed upstairs. This place was pure stone, by the way. Nothing was broken or anything, and it was like everything just sort of disappeared. We entered a room which we quickly figured out was an old morgue. We were talking, taking photos, etc. And I remember feeling like something was watching me as soon as I entered that room, though my friends were laughing and telling me to loosen up a bit, when all of a sudden, I hear heavy footsteps behind me running across the room. Honestly, at first I thought I was crazy, but then I noticed that the others had heard it too. We were absolutely terrified at this point, freaking out and looking every which way. I got out my hot pink taser, in which I still have, and started yelling, trying to look intimidating. I remember hearing one of the medical machines knock over and my friend screaming, but my eyes could not look away from the door that was completely dark. I remember hearing those heavy footsteps coming toward us at full speed, and then stopping. All I hear after that is, "Hey kiddo, how was your day at school?" I remember my heart stopping. I didn't see anything, and I didn't stick around to find out either. We ran all the way out without any question. We got in the car safely, thank God, but when we were well away from the place, my friend turned to me and said, "What was that?" I really don't remember what I said. In fact, I don't think I said anything in the end. I never told them the truth that was actually my dad's voice. You see, my dad died a year ago at that point, and I just didn't know what to think about it. In fact, I never told anyone what really happened that day. So, I had this experience last week. I won't go into too much detail, but my brother, his wife and son were going out for a meal at a well-known buffet in London. Before leaving, they said their goodbyes, etc. Nothing strange there, until the doorbell rang and he came back an hour or so later, which I immediately felt odd about, as the drive to the buffet place is at least 30 minutes minimum, meaning that they would have to drive 30 minutes each way and only eat for 30 minutes. I didn't question it at first. My brother came in when I opened the door and said that he was full, and it looked like he was waiting for his wife and son to come in from the car. Well, so it seemed. Anyway, I turned around and went upstairs back to my room. About 20 minutes later, I got a WhatsApp message from my brother telling me that he's finishing up dessert and will be leaving in 20 minutes. I assumed that he was going out again elsewhere for dessert, as I guess the buffet dessert wasn't good enough, so told him to leave the key out when he leaves so that he can let himself back in. And that's where the confusion came in. He said, "What do you mean? I'm at the buffet and you already locked the door when I left, didn't you?" Honestly, I thought that he was joking at first, and came downstairs to double check, and I noticed the front door was left open. I rushed to the door and locked it immediately, and checked the Ring doorbell app to make sense of everything. But there were no doorbell press alerts and no motion alerts recorded either. Both me and my wife heard the doorbell though, and I definitely let someone or something in. Checking my brother's room after I got his permission, there was no one there or in any other rooms in the household. A week has gone by since then and no other strange occurrences so far, but honestly, let's hope it stays that way. This encounter happened a few months ago. For context, I, 18-year-old male, live about 1.5 kilometers away from a shopping center, or just under a mile. The route that I take usually requires me to turn 2 corners and walk straight for the rest of the journey. Although pretty early on in the walk, there is a tall apartment block to the left of the pathway along the main road. I would say it was about 4 or 5 levels, and you had to pass it too. Now, I live in a shady area, and previously the apartment block, it had a case of a stabbing that killed a woman a year before my story takes place. I even witnessed the cleanup crews hosing the area down when that happened. It was pretty horrific if you ask me. But this caused me to be pretty wary of the area in general. On this day in particular, I needed to go to the shopping center to pick up a couple of supplies. I noticed as I started walking the pathway of the straight road that the sky was pretty dark that evening. It was early in the afternoon, so this meant that a storm was probably on the way. Not a drop of rain fell as I made my way to the shop though. Once I had arrived, I picked up what I needed and went window shopping for a while. When I was satisfied, I exited through the door that I had originally entered and began walking back home. I made it to the final set of traffic lights that was probably about a 7-minute walk away from my house. The rain started to trickle at first, and then after that it poured pretty heavily. 3 minutes later, I could see the apartment block about 20 meters ahead to the right. The rain was still pouring down, and so the visibility wasn't that great. But what I could make out was a man in a dark green poncho. He had the hood of the poncho over his head and a big grin on his face for some reason. As I got closer and closer to him, I didn't like the feeling that I was getting. All of a sudden, too, he reached his arms out almost as if he was attempting to bring me into his embrace, keeping that same smile he had before. The man was about 5 meters distance from me when I took the opportunity to cross onto the median strip of the main road. I noticed his glance followed me as I crossed into the middle grassy patch, and even though there was no traffic, he decided not to chase me down and continued walking along the pathway as he kept eye contact with me. Eventually I got inside, and he must have left after some time because I didn't see him again. The thought, though, of what might have happened if I had walked into his arms still frightens me today. Even if he didn't mean any harm and was not trying to grab me, I still didn't like the vibe that I got from this guy. And when I reached the middle of the road, I definitely felt safer and relieved, especially considering that he didn't attempt to follow behind me or whatever. But I don't know, I definitely am going to be keeping my head on a swivel for quite some time after this because something tells me that this may not be over. Several things happened in this house, but I'll try to make this as quick as I can and just give you a few stories, because honestly, I could be here all day. So my brother and I wanted to be roomies again, and decided to move into a cute 2-story 3-bedroom house. It was me, my brother, my nephew, my dog, and their tortoise. As we were moving into the house, I was putting boxes in the little closet. It was under the stairs, and I was just thinking that this could be the tortoise's little hangout spot. As I was leaning into the closet to slide a box in, I hear a loud, audible growling directly in my ear. I said nope to that and closed the door. I looked around to see if my dog was nearby, but she was outside, so that was weird. I probably should have known right then that there was something wrong, but I guess I just forgot about it. One unfortunate thing was that my dog just acted really strange in that house, always. For example, a couple of times we would come home from work and she would just be terrified for no reason. We couldn't even get close to her without her whimpering, crying out, and cowering down. Mind you, she's never been afraid of us, and we were never abusive to her, so this was really off. We were wondering if it was possible that the landlord didn't change the locks, or maybe they were letting themselves in and someone kicked her, hit her, or hurt her for some reason out of protecting our home. She is a very protective dog, so she would have barked and acted aggressive towards some stranger coming into the house without us there. Another thing that really got to me was I caught her several times just sort of staring and growling at the upper right corner of my bedroom. Sometimes she would also wag her tail, sit, and raise her paw like she was taking commands from someone, but mostly it was just aggressive growling and showing teeth. It was very odd because she's never done that before or since we left that house. She never showed any of this sort of behavior before or after that house, and I've had her for 10 years. The random growling episodes really freaked me out too because it was just so unlike her. But I tried to tell myself that maybe she was just getting old and her sight was not that great anymore. But one day, my on and off again boyfriend showed up randomly in the middle of the night. We weren't on the best of terms and I was hesitant, but I allowed him to stay the night because he was drunk and didn't need to drive any more than he already had. I woke up the next day for work and just let him stay there. While I was gone, he was just hanging out in my room and he said that he got this really weird feeling, and then my bedroom door just slammed hard. At first I was like, well, there must have been a breeze. But then he explained that after the door slammed, he saw a huge black shadow thing in the upper right corner of my room, and stated that this house was haunted, which was really unlike him. He didn't believe in that kind of thing. I'm sure I went pale when he said that because I never told him anything about my dog's weird growling episodes, and of course it was the exact same spot. Normally, I would have written it off as just maybe a hallucination from alcohol withdrawal or something like that, but him pointing to that spot made me realize that I was dealing with some sort of a psycho demon. And then, one day, I saw it. I was just sitting in my room, and from my room, I could see the wall and the banister of the stairs, and I got this weird feeling, which I assume was what my ex-boyfriend felt that day, like when you get bad news and your heart drops to your stomach. And then, I saw this huge black shadow cascade down the wall and the banister of the stairs. I just sat there in complete terror, watching this thing come down the wall toward me. And look, I know I sound absolutely insane when I say this, but it's like I could just feel that it was on a mission and had intentions to get to me and, well, take over me, like possess me. I was horrified, but I went into fight mode. I wasn't a religious person and I had no idea what the heck I was doing. If I'm being honest, I just said things that I saw in movies. I started saying things like, "You're not welcome here. Only love and light are welcome in this home. The power of Christ commands you to leave." And when I began saying that last part, again, it was like I could feel its fear and hesitation, and it started slinking back up the wall the same way that it had come down. A few other things to note too is that all of us, even the dog, were just absolutely depressed in that house. It was like we were all shells of our former selves. We acted different. We had no energy, we had no social life outside of work. I was having suicidal thoughts and I have never had them before or since then. I was having nightmares constantly. I lost so much weight for no reason at all too. My brother and I were having really heated arguments when we've always gotten along well and lived together both before and after this house without any issues. We are both very healthy people and never really get sick, but both my brother and I got very sick with very odd illnesses that nobody could diagnose. I was even hospitalized at one point and the doctors didn't know how to diagnose me. It may seem a bit uneventful to the people listening to this, but man, the scary moments were very scary, but the mental torment for almost 2 years was honestly the worst of it all. It was a daily battle. It's hard to explain, but I think back to that time and I almost want to cry because it's like I can feel the way I felt back then. The depression and horrible negative headspace that I was in, almost like a messed up case of nostalgia. Thank goodness we were able to cut our lease early and leave. And once we moved into a new house, everything went back to normal and we were all our happy selves again. In those based on true events movies, where people move into a haunted house and it slowly drives them crazy, well yeah, I believe it now because I've lived it. The house that I currently live in, I've lived in perfectly fine for 6 years now, but I've seen, felt, and heard things in this house. So about 5 years ago, my now ex-husband, his name is Joe, was leaving for work early one morning and he shut the door. After he shut the door, I heard his name being called in the laundry room, which was where he went out, and also right beside the master bedroom. The really creepy part about it, though, is that it was my voice and I immediately got chills. After that, our oldest son, who was just crawling at the time, had this sort of VTech phone that he would play with. Somehow it ended up in the corner of our living room and we had a recliner that sat in front of that corner. I didn't know the phone was back there until it started going 666 over and over again. Please keep in mind, though, that this toy was off at the time. So I picked it up and I threw it outside in the trash. Later, Joe got home and I told him about it and he laughed and told me that I was probably just hearing things. Fast forward a couple of hours, I was in the shower and he comes in telling me that he needs to talk to me. So I ask about what, and he said that he didn't want to talk inside, he wanted to talk outside. I get out of the shower and put some clothes on and step outside with him, and he tells me that he was taking the trash out, and when he lifted the lid to the trash can outside, the toy, it went off saying 666, and when he looked at it, he confirmed that it was definitely off. I've also felt like I'm being watched. I've heard things moving. I've heard my kids when they aren't even there. Another strong occurrence was after Joe and I split. He came over to see our kids, and I still had the same recliner that the phone was behind, but I got another recliner and had it on the other corner, both facing the TV. He sits in the left one if you're facing the TV, and I sit in the right, and shortly after he sits down, there were 3 knocks on the front door. So he looks at me, and I get a really bad feeling. He goes to open the door, and I told him not to. He does anyway, and there's no one there. So he sits back down, and a few minutes later, there are 3 knocks on the wall behind him. He looks at me wide-eyed, and I just stare at him in a I told you type of way. So 30 or so minutes go by, and we ended up switching recliners, just because we were both up, and now he sits in the right recliner. In the living room, I also had my kid's toy box, and one of the toys that always sat on the floor is like the big square things that you see at doctor's offices with the colourful wire and the beads on it. Well, it literally picked itself up about a foot off the ground and slammed itself on the floor. And at that, his face goes white and he looks at me, and I said, "They don't like you." He left shortly after that. Now, my ex-husband also told me that he left the house one night because he had seen something, like a dark figure, and things got really bad, like it would let us leave and some paranormal activity type stuff would happen, but I really don't remember that too much. I have been having the feeling, though, that something bad is going to happen, and sometimes I just don't feel safe there. But I don't know if anyone has experienced this, and if anyone thinks it could be malicious or just a ghost that's harmless, I would really like to know what I should do next, because I'm sort of in 2 minds, I guess. So, I have very bad insomnia, which leads me to staying awake most nights. And this happened a couple of weeks ago. So we recently changed the flooring in the house from regular carpet to wooden flooring. As a result from our walls being thin and my new door not fitting properly, I can pretty much hear everything going on in the house crystal clear at the moment. I was laying down trying to sleep, and it must have been around 2:30 or 3 in the morning. My dad had already left for work, and my sister was asleep at this point, so was my dad's wife and my little brother. The thing is, though, is that my little sister's door makes this sort of loud creak when it opens, and I can always hear any door in the house opening since it's a small house and my room is almost in the middle. Well, as I'm laying there with the house dead silent, suddenly there's this sort of, I don't know, like shuffling sound coming from the living room, which is just outside of my room. It's just going in circles around the living room too. It's not footsteps, it's some sort of shuffling or weird noise. The closest sounds that I can describe it is when my little brother, when he gets upset and instead of walking like normal, he sort of shuffles his feet by not taking footsteps and instead sliding his feet across the wooden floor. The other sound that is sort of similar to what I heard is that when I wear my jeans without shoes, the length of them is too long for me, but that's how I like them, and that, however, makes it so that even when I take a step in the jeans, they don't go off the floor and they sort of drag and create a shuffling noise. That is pretty much what this sounded like. So, I keep hearing a sort of shuffling noise, and it's not consistent. It kind of shuffles for a bit, then stops, then shuffles again. And it does this for some time, just doing circles in the living room. The kitchen is tile, so there would be no shuffling in there, but I thought when I first heard it, great, rats are in the house. But no, it doesn't seem to go to the tiles, it just kept shuffling around in circles in the living room. It gets worse too, because then I start to hear it shuffling closer to the hallway where my door is at. Now, my little brother will sometimes run down the hallway with his fingers and nails on the wall, so I know what it sounds like when someone is running, or a hand or nails or whatever against the wall. And since my room wall makes up part of the hallway wall, it resonates loudly in my room. Whatever it is though, it starts slowly running fingers or something across the wall, slowly moving it to my door. It's moving its body, or what sounds like a hand, across the hallway's wall slowly until it reaches my door. Then it goes quiet for what feels like a couple of minutes. I think to myself, whatever. It has just stopped and it's gone away anyway, so I should get some sleep. But that was when I hear something scratching at my door. It's not fast or frantic scratching. It's slow, purposeful scratching, just slow scratching from the top of the door to the bottom and repeating itself. After a while of that happening, I then hear it shuffling back to the living room. It then quickly turned into a cycle. It would just shuffle around in the living room, then after a while it would scratch the wall to my room and scratch at my door, then back to the living room again. This cycle kept repeating until sometime into the morning, when I started seeing the first sign of light, and basically as soon as the first sign of light came, I mustered up the courage to leave my room and check. But when I did, there was nothing there. All the doors were locked, and like I said, my room is in the dead middle of the house. The walls are thin and my door doesn't fit properly, so I can hear any of the doors open. It's something that I've grown used to. I would have been able to hear if anyone opened one of those doors, but that never happened. So I know for a fact that it wasn't one of them. My hunch is that it was probably just a big rat, but I don't know any rat on the west coast that would just shuffle around the living room like that, scratch the wall slowly, stop at my door, scratch at it for a bit, then repeat the cycle over and over again. Plus, rats can't reach that high. Whatever it was, it freaked me out real bad, and I'm not the type to get scared easily by any means. Whatever it was, it genuinely shook me to my core. Before I start, I just want to say that I haven't really told many people this, mostly because it was a very scary experience for me and I really don't like to relive it. Anyway, this happened in Kelowna, Canada in the 80s. I was about 14 and was babysitting at a neighbor's house while the parents were gone. They had a really nice house too, like most in the neighborhood, and it was right on the corner where two streets connected. My house was right outside of a bus stop, across from theirs. This happened pretty late at night in the winter, so it was dark out, maybe 11 or 12 at night. I was sitting on the couch when I thought that I saw something at the back door. It was one of those glass doors that led to the porch, and it was weird though because I really couldn't see too much. But you know when the lights are on and it's dark out, so you can't really see anything but black in your reflection? Well, that's sort of what I saw, but I could have sworn that it looked like something was there. So I got up and I walked close to the window. It definitely looked like something was there, but I just still couldn't really see it. I got closer and closer, still couldn't see. I honestly should have just turned on the lights, but instead I put my face right to the glass and cupped my hands by my eyes to look out. And maybe about 1 inch from my face, on the other side of the glass, was a man. He looked tall and pale from what I could see, which wasn't too much, and he was staring at me very creepily. Keep in mind, he would have been watching from the backyard. Naturally, too, I jumped back and let out a short scream, but stupid teenage me didn't call the cops. I called my parents instead. My father, he came over to take a look. There were still footprints in the front and the backyard. I don't remember too much after that because It just felt like a very unreal experience, I guess. You never expect this stuff to happen to you. That is, until it does. I lived in a very small town from the age of 5 to 6. We didn't stay there long. Not because of anything that happened, but my parents just wanted to move to the city. I don't remember hardly anything from this age, but every memory that I can think of has to do with something scary that actually happened. To set the scene, we lived on some land in a house that was built in possibly the 50s or 60s. I tried to do some research to find out exactly, but I can't seem to find anything at this point. If I do, I'll make sure that I update you. After finding out the address from my parents, I put it into Google Maps and realized that our house was only about a mile or two away from the church where I had the experience from my last post. The church has also been around since about 1873 and has a graveyard attached to it as well. On the land is our house, a very creepy barn, and a pasture full of cows that belong to our landlord. My dad let me know that we used the barn for storage, and this cleared up one of my experiences. It was most definitely a dream, but the dream still freaks me out anyways. So to start with my dream, I remember for some reason that I went into the barn. Me and my brothers usually stayed away from there because there were a lot of rusty tools and it honestly just looked scary, to be honest, but when I walked into the barn, I could see the middle part of the floor was slightly raised for storage underneath. After talking to my dad, he said the barn didn't have any underground storage, but I remember looking down into the floor and seeing 2 kids around my age playing in the underground section. I also recall them inviting me down with them there. Since I know that the floor wasn't raised, I'm wondering what this could mean. It was most definitely a dream, but why? Anyway, so this next thing happened in the house, and bear with me because there's a bit. So my 2 older brothers shared a room and had their own bed in either side of the room. I believe that whatever was in the house, it seemed to target them the most since I don't really remember anything happening to me there. But my oldest brother told us one time that he was trying to fall asleep when suddenly he felt someone pushing against the mattress underneath him. Of course, he thought that it was our other brother messing with him, but when he looked under the bed, there was nothing and nobody there. Both of my brothers also mentioned many times that they would see feet in their closet at night. They would leave the light on in there but close the door and could see someone's feet blocking the light. Of course, when they opened the door, there was nothing there. They also have talked about hearing scratches on the door. And while I was talking to my mum about all of this, she told me about one night where she couldn't find my second oldest brother. She searched the house and couldn't find him anywhere until she found him asleep under his bed. Now, he's never been known to sleepwalk, so that was really odd. My oldest brother also told me a while ago about how every once in a while my older brother would sit up in bed and stare at the wall in front of him in the middle of the night. He would tell him to lay down and go to sleep, but got ignored. Of course, he never remembered sitting up in his bed like this, but that was also a bit strange. The last thing I remember is that my oldest brother had a huge bin of Legos that he always kept under his bed, and some nights he would hear the Legos being shuffled around down there. Of course, he always thought that it was my other brother until he saw him asleep in his bed. My oldest brother passed away 2 years ago, so I won't be able to ask him about anything anymore, but I'll try to talk to my other brother about it. He's not much older than me, so there's a good chance that he doesn't remember either, especially since he was asleep when, well, pretty much anything happened to him. Also, a quick little mention as well is that the cows, they just did not act normal at all. I don't know if this has anything to do with paranormal activity, but they seemed to always be terrified of humans and ran away anytime that you came close. Usually cows are pretty friendly, kind of like a big dog, I guess, but no one ever believes me when I talk about any of this. So I'm glad that I found this space where people just, well, listen, I guess. I don't doubt that any of this happened. The town that I lived in was the first settlement in my state, and it has a very deep history. It all makes more sense now after I found out that we live so close to the church as well. Currently, I live about an hour away from the house. I'm almost tempted to try and contact whoever owns it now and see if I can visit or ask if they've experienced anything themselves. Odds are, the house and the barn are no longer there, and when I looked at the property, it says the house is bigger than it was when we lived there, so I think they may have torn it down and built a new home anyway. Probably not a good idea to go back, but I am definitely curious, and what do you guys think? Should I? When I was around the age of 6, my mum started to clean our church every week to help out. During this time, we were renting a farmhouse where me and my two older brothers experienced quite a few paranormal events, but my parents never gave it the light of day due to them being very Christian and conservative. Now one day my mum was cleaning the church and my brothers and I sort of tagged along since my dad was working that day. While my mum cleaned, we decided to play hide and seek since the church was empty. Eventually I was the seeker looking for my brother, and I remember walking down a long hallway. Since the church was closed and my mum was just cleaning the room where the sermons were held, all the other lights were off except for the emergency lights. When I was walking in the very dim hall, for some reason I felt the need to look up, and from that moment I cannot get the image of what I saw out of my head. There was an all-black figure around the size of a 6 or 7-year-old. The figure was crawling on the ceiling, so I was looking at its back, only it had noticed me, so it had twisted its head all the way around to see me. The face was blurry since it was dark, but I could make out an almost cartoonish smile staring at me, and I remember its eyes being not human-like at all. The weird thing about this is, despite how creepy I remember the figure being, my 6-year-old self was not scared at all. I remember thinking to myself, how did my brother get up there? Then I felt the need to leave the hallway. When I saw its face, I didn't feel my stomach drop, nor did I feel scared or threatened. It just felt like whatever I saw wanted me to just move along. To this day, I don't have any idea what it was. My brothers called me crazy and said there can't be any demons in a church since it's protected by God, and my parents agreed. The older I got, the more I wondered if it was just a dream that made itself a memory. But it just feels so real when I think about it, and I'm able to describe it in such great detail. I don't really remember any other times that we played hide and seek, but this one sticks out, and family remembers this day as well, so there's that. I know children are more likely to have paranormal experiences, and my brother also had things happen to them, but it was at the house, and why did I see something at our church? After doing some research, I found out that the church had been around there since about 1873, and I remember there was a cemetery on the land as well with the same name as the church. I'm happy to talk about some other things that happened in the house, but I really don't remember much, and the only things my brothers have told me, and that's about it. The house was very old and in the middle of nowhere. It was an old farmhouse that someone purchased and renovated some days back. The barn was a no-no zone and gave us all the creeps. The cows on the land acted very strange as well, and the house just had a really weird vibe overall. This just happened, and I'm still pretty shaken by all of it. But this evening, whilst putting away some clothes in my closet, I noticed the entry point to my attic had been disturbed and set ajar. I live in a condo with my wife and child. Our master bedroom was a walk-in closet with an access point or lid or whatever to our attic. I don't believe the attic connects with any other condo, but we do share walls with neighbors on both sides. Anyway, as I was folding and putting away laundry this evening, my wife walked in from the connecting bathroom. Our master bedroom's bathroom connects directly across from the walk-in closet, so they face entryways. and went to ask me something when she gasped and said, "Look up." My blood turned cold immediately, because there it was. The entry point drywall lid was lifted out of place and set ajar. She had been giving our child a bath at that time, basically right there, and I froze for a moment, not really knowing exactly how to handle the situation. I got a hold of myself and dialed 911 while my wife and child went downstairs in a hurry. She got the both of them ready while I stayed on guard watching the entry to the attic crawl space. Police showed up after what I felt like an eternity and checked up there but couldn't find anything. No signs of forced entry or anything, just an obviously lifted up and placed ajar crawl space cover. Now I'm here, alone, wondering if we just overreacted or what exactly happened. Somebody or something moved that lid, door or cover or whatever you want to call it. That much is for certain. It wasn't bumped or hit by myself or my wife, and my child is not able to get anywhere near the access point. Plus, it was like off and moved, not sort of like gently buffeted by the wind or anything. The creepiest part or thing that bothers me though is that I don't know if it was moved from inside the attic or from my closet below. Police said the drywall that connects up there wasn't broken or cut open or anything. Again, I live in a condo with neighbors on both sides, and there was no signs of disturbed fiberglass near the entry or around my closet, so no one was like obviously crawling around or messing with stuff up there at least. I am seriously thinking about somehow placing a lock on the entry point, but I'm not good with that kind of handiwork and wouldn't really even know how to begin cutting or making a sturdier lid or access to even try to put a lock on one. And I know that this may not be considered paranormal to most, but weirdly I had a dream about a similar situation a couple of weeks to a month or so ago. In my dream, a woman called me seemingly on a random day and said bluntly, "Is there someone inside of your house?" I panicked and rushed everyone in my house out of the door. I had my wife out the front with my kid, but I also had other family members over that day, so not exactly the same situation, and I can't remember if we found anyone or anything in that day in my dream. But yeah, it's been a really strange night to say the least. Thanks for listening, and if you have any advice on my situation, then that would be greatly appreciated. In 2018, I lived with my partner and my German Shepherd in the Humboldt Park neighborhood of Chicago. I was 33 years old, and our apartment was a 4th floor walk-up unit. Very typical low-budget Chicago rental in a changing neighborhood. The layout of our building is going to matter to this story, so our building had a total of 12 units. Mine and the 3 below me had a shared front entrance, and the other 8 units were through a second entrance. All 12 apartments had connected back porches and stairs that shared a walkway to a rear gate, which led to an alleyway. From the front stairwell, there are windows on each landing to the back porches, so you can see the back door of my apartment when standing at the front door through that window. We had good relations with our neighbors, especially those who lived directly below us and shared our front door, and this was the thing that saved all 3 of us. My partner, my dog, and me. So, my partner was in a touring band at the time, and would leave for the weekends or weeks at a time, and it was a scary thing for me because I'd have been assaulted and stalked by an ex in my teens and 20s. I always worried something would trip him off and he'd start stalking me again or whatever. A little less than a month before a 2-week tour my partner had scheduled, I received a pretty creepy Facebook message from that stalker or ex from yet another new account. About a week after that, my car was broken into, the glove box was emptied, things were thrown around, but the only thing that was taken was a bag of dog treats. I had about $20 in change in the compartment between the seats, and they left that money, so that was really weird. I was on high alert though at that point, and very scared about the time that I'd be alone during the tour. My partner was kind of irritated with me in the situation and felt that it was too last minute to cancel, especially over what amounted to a bad feeling and a few isolated things that weren't really direct threats or anything. And truthfully, car break-ins are very, very common in Chicago. It's happened to me like 15 times, and police usually do the reports over the phone and don't even come to the scene now. What I found really strange, though, was that the thief didn't take any money. There was a homeless guy, though, who had started camping on the boulevard nearby recently as well. In any case, my partner left for his tour, and I set up cameras and bought door braces for my front and back doors. I became completely nocturnal, unable to sleep at night. My poor dog developed diarrhea, maybe because she was picking up on my stress level or something. And it meant that I was taking her down all 4 flights of stairs for her to go blast her bowels like 6 or 7 times a night. I had the distinct prickly crawling sensation of being watched, though, when I would take her out, but I couldn't tell what was genuine and what was just my own fear and paranoia. Her diarrhea lasted an unusually long time, like 3 or 4 days. I was going in and out of the main door a lot, feeling very scared, and I noticed that some of my neighbors wouldn't pull the door all the way closed, so the lock was engaged. I mentioned it to my downstairs neighbor one day, including that I was extra careful because of the stalker. He was supportive, said that he had mentioned it to the other neighbors if he saw them, and I noticed that the door was locked more frequently after that. My partner eventually came home at about 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning. At about 8:30 a.m. that morning, my first-floor neighbor's place was burglarized. He was a metalhead dude who collected instruments, sold weed and psychedelics, and lived alone. I guess he went out for breakfast and he left his door unlocked while he was gone. Someone had come in, eating the leftovers in his fridge, took a coat and pair of boots, and also left a filthy coat and a pair of boots, took his college diploma, but left $500 in the same cabinet. They also left all of the expensive musical instruments and mixing equipment, left the drugs, but did take a set of keys. The keys were to the first-floor apartment and a master key for the front door and the back gate. Now, my neighbors ran into each other right after the break-in, and the second-floor neighbor said to go and tell me because I had a stalker, so my metalhead neighbor came up to let me know what had happened. My partner had just gotten home from his tour when he knocked at the front door. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but looked through the peephole, recognized him, and the 3 of us stood on the stairs at my front door while he told us about the break-in. We sort of jabber-jawed for a while, about 15 to 20 minutes, and while we were talking, we heard the front door open and close below us, but didn't think anything of it. Then we saw a man climbing up my back porch, my steps that is, to my back door through the window. There was no other apartment that he could have been going to, and he had to walk past all 11 more accessible units on his way to mine. He was not my stalker. I didn't recognize him, but his image is burned in my mind. He was wearing flashy black and white high-top sneakers, not the ones stolen from downstairs. His black coat was oversized and hanging off of his shoulders. We locked eyes through the window, and he froze halfway up the stairs to my back porch. He slowly took a cell phone and called someone as he slowly turned around halfway up the steps. He walked back down the stairs in a really artificially sort of slow-motion way, like he was pretending to be nonchalant, and then bolted into a sprint as soon as he hit the porch below mine. My neighbor ran downstairs and dialed 911. My partner and I ran through the apartment to the back porch and saw a sedan and windowless van pull out from the sketchy building 2 doors down. Both cars floored it out of the alleyway. We didn't get the plates, but the cops said that it wouldn't have mattered because there wasn't any crime committed and nothing concrete to justify stopping them. They very condescendingly explained this to me as they took my statement later. My neighbor is the one who actually made the call and has the police report. My partner and I were just considered witnesses at this point. For a long time too, the thing that scared me the most was the tool that my neighbor found when he went downstairs. It was a 2x4 piece of wood, cut to about 2 feet, but about 6 inches of it had been made into a handle. It looked a bit like a paddle, and for a long time I couldn't figure out what it was, but I'm pretty sure it was a ram for the door jamb or the locks. When I looked at my door afterward, it looked like the frame had been repaired as well, like it had been broken open before. And it seems like they used the one master key to place their ram, get somebody at the back door to catch me if I tried to run out that way, and somebody else was going to come back around, since they only had one key, and they'd break in my front door and go forward with whatever they had planned. When we caught them before they could catch me unaware, they seemed to have aborted the plan, I guess, and I suspect that they'd been watching me, especially while I was taking out my dog, and figured that I was alone. It was pure coincidence that my partner had gotten home 30 minutes before all of this, and I feel like we all could have been horribly injured or worse had we been trapped inside and they'd gotten the jump on us. Nothing else ever really came of this, except that my landlord refused to change the locks, but he did agree to let us out of our lease. I moved out of Chicago and now have added a younger dog I'm training to do some bite work. My house is surrounded by cameras and floodlights and wingnut neighbors, so this time I feel a lot safer. Like I said, thankfully nothing happened, but it definitely felt like a near miss. My girlfriend and I moved into a new apartment roughly 3 years ago. She has since then been suffering from weekly sleep paralysis. Her brother used to have them when they were children, so she knew what they were right away. She has described it as being completely paralyzed, besides breathing and moving her eyes. And most of the time she sees a dark, tall figure moving around our apartment when they happen. Sometimes she just hears him walking, sometimes he's staring at her from the door, and sometimes he presses down on her chest, making it difficult for her to breathe. She is a non-believer of the paranormal, and yet this sleep paralysis terrifies her. So now to the really scary part. So she usually manages to wake me up during these by breathing quickly and loudly. I can then wake her from it, which enables her to move again and the figure disappears. What I haven't told her though is that these past 2 months, I have actually seen the figure as well. Right after I'm woken up by her breathing, I can see it bent over her that is, pushing down on her ribcage. It always disappears the second that I acknowledge it, or try to wake her. I've also seen it standing in the hallway staring at me one night, while I was home alone watching a movie. I pretended that I didn't see it, and it had disappeared the next time that I looked over. Now to the dilemma. So, do I tell my girlfriend that her sleep paralysis demon might not be a regular sleep paralysis demon after all, since I've seen it too, and also at the same time as her, waking her up from the paralysis at night, that is? I guess I don't want to scare her. I mean, she's already terrified from the sleep paralysis itself, and that is when she feels certain that it's just in her own head. We can't afford to move either, and I think we can both live like this, given that I never tell her the truth, that is. So, what's your advice? Should I tell her, or should I just let it be? This is the story of the scariest moment of my life. It's been a few months since I experienced this sighting, but I'm still pretty terrified to go out at night due to seeing what I saw. So about 3 months ago, I had moved on to an 11-acre property in rural Texas, specifically between Yorktown and Smiley. The entire plot of land was about maybe 3 to 4 times the size of the lot that we purchased, but nobody had purchased any of the other portions while we were there. The land was fresh, never had been built on before, and didn't even have an address. It was surrounded solely by oil pumps on neighboring properties. At night, you could actually see the burning off from them, lighting part of the sky orange. Our house was a bare-bones tiny house. No walls, just wooden beams and a bare floor. No running water, no plumbing. We had to dig the electric from the pole all the way to the house ourselves. And that's how the new property was. It was a miserable experience all around, but we were poor and it was really the only living situation that we could find. Now, I've never been a believer in the paranormal. I still don't really believe in things like ghosts or demons. I'm a sort of, if I see it, I'll believe it person. After this experience, though, I am definitely more open to these types of things. What I saw I just call the creature. Creative, I know. When I moved onto the property, there were some weird anomalies in technology that started to happen. Phones would glitch out and stop working, the cameras would act strange, and parked cars that were turned off would suddenly chime and lights would turn on. I always thought that it was odd, but I never connected it to the property until my girlfriend mentioned the strange happenings later on after my sighting. One night, soon after I moved there, I had to get something out of my car, and I took my phone light, walked out, opened the door, and started digging around in the glove box with my full focus on finding what I was looking for. I forgot exactly what it was that I was searching for in the end. After looking for a while and not finding it, I closed the door and shone my light back towards the house. There was a truck parked between me and the door to the house, and as I shone my light towards the truck, I became instantly terrified because what I saw was a tall, I would guess 7 to 8 foot, humanoid creature with white, sort of sickly-looking skin. Its arms and legs looked longer than a human's, and as I shone my light in that direction, it instantly ran off. It had the capability to leap over the truck, mind you, landing in the bed momentarily before hopping over the other edge and disappearing beyond my sight. I distinctly remember how the truck shook when it nimbly jumped over it. The time that it took to do that was about 4 to 5 seconds. I never did get to see its face, and to be honest, I'm glad that I didn't, as I would probably be even more traumatized than I already am. I can only imagine what its face looked like. Would it have reflective eyes like an animal? I still wonder about that. Instead of stepping in the car and locking the door, I quickly walked around the truck and into the house, like an idiot, I know, but I was really terrified though when I stepped around the truck that it would be waiting there for me. Luckily it wasn't, but for the rest of the night I was absolutely horrified, as well as the rest of the time that I lived there, which was only about a month. I would have thought, okay, maybe I just imagined it, but it was just so clear to me. Even the fact that the truck shook was a detail that was just too realistic to be my imagination. And plus, I have one more thing too. I wasn't the only one who actually saw it. My girlfriend saw it out of the window at one point, though not as clearly as I had seen it. She did some digging, and other people have seen a similar creature in the area apparently, and that makes it clear to me that what I saw was real. I still doubt it to some degree, I guess, because, how could it be real, right? But I just cannot see any other way to explain it. I still wonder what would have happened to me if I hadn't turned around when I did. It seemed like it might have been stalking me or something. I can only imagine in terror what it might have done to me if I hadn't have turned around and saw it. I'm honestly traumatized from this experience, as silly as that may seem. I feel embarrassed saying it, in fact, but it's true. I know sightings like this to me before I experienced it myself would just make me think these people are crazy, or they're making it up for attention, fame, they're faking it. But now, I'm more open-minded towards people's experiences. I don't want to be famous or anything, I just want someone to know what I experienced that night. I want to know what it is that I might have actually seen, if anyone has any idea. So please, do let me know what you think. I'm never moving to the countryside again, mind you, ever. I'd rather get stabbed by some homeless Austinite than live out there and die from whatever that creature was. So this happened in I would say 2017. I was walking home from school, my mum worked late and my father was out for a business trip. My brother's college was farther away, so he always came half an hour to an hour after me. But when I go home myself, I would always take the shortcut. It was an enclosed path with rarely any people. There was a man a few steps behind me at one point, and since I was a young and dumb child, I didn't think too much of it. When the enclosed path ended and connected to the sidewalk, I saw the guy getting in a white van. Getting slightly suspicious now, I started running to my house, noticing the van was following me. He was definitely following me too, and I wasn't just being paranoid. I took a couple of wrong turns, but the van just kept on staying behind me, so I took a detour, and when I finally thought that I'd lost him, I ran back to my house and locked all my doors and windows. After I did this, I looked outside and I saw the white van sitting at the front of my house. I frantically called my mother and my brother. My mum wouldn't be home for another few hours, and my brother had half an hour left. My mum told me to go to my parents' room and get a gun. I went into my parents' room and went to their closet and got a gun. Mind you, the closest thing that I ever did to shooting was archery, so I wasn't really ready for this or anything. In any case, I went downstairs with a gun and grabbed a knife. My mum was calling the police, by the way. I went to the window and saw somebody trying to peek into the house. And with that, I pointed a gun at them and threatened them. Upon seeing me with the gun, they left and ran away. My brother finally came home and I told him what happened. We looked at the security camera and we saw him trying to get in through the back door, then giving up and coming to the window to peek in. After my mum came home, the cops showed up. They tried to trace his license plate number and all that. I would see that same white van pass my house every day until the police finally caught him. Turns out, he was actually an escaped convict, high on something. So, am I glad that I had that gun that day, and that he didn't get in. So, for starters, I live in a very secluded area. We do have neighbors, but plenty of space in between us. About a good horse pasture, or maybe two. You can't really hear each other from that distance, unless you're being very loud, which even then you can't hear them well. Well, tonight I was walking my dog and misjudged the time a little bit. It was dark, but he needed to get on with his business. I turned on my flashlight and told him to stay close. I verbally expressed to him, yes, my dog, that it was dark and I didn't want to walk too far. Eventually, though, I shook off my worry and decided to go a little bit further than I would have liked. I've always been scared of the dark a bit, I guess, but it bothers me sometimes more than others. At this point, we are far enough from the house that I can only see around me from the flashlight. I have my house in view, but the porch light is very old and doesn't span out over the yard or anything. I don't come out this far at night unless my husband is with me, usually. But when Buddy began to head back, I heard a sound. At first, I thought it was a bird in a nearby tree. I stood there for a second to pinpoint the direction that it was coming from. When I looked around, it grew louder. I'm obviously uneasy at this point. The reality of how far away from home we are begins to set in. I start walking toward Buddy so that we can make our way back, and that was when the sound grows closer. It takes me back for a second, and it sounds almost like a flock of birds, though not. It's as if someone was playing a sound of birds on a tape recorder or something. I glance over to my dog, and he's looking toward the sound with his head tilted on the side. I look to where he's facing and notice that it's in the deepest part of the woods on our property. I tell Buddy that it's time to go inside. I didn't hide the panic in my voice or anything, and that's when the sound seemed to pick up pace and grows even closer. I run as fast as I can to the house, Buddy thankfully knows that if Mum is running, then he should too. We got to the house fine, and the sound only faded as we got to the fence. Buddy was very alert for the next couple of minutes and wouldn't leave my side. I've tried to calm myself down by considering that my neighbors have chickens or whatever. The thing is that the only neighbor that has them doesn't live on that end of the wood line. In fact, no one does. Not for a few miles at least. It's just open land there. By some chance that this sounds crazy and you think that it was probably just birds, I sort of do too, but you first have to understand that my parents are farmers. They have many types of birds: chickens, guineas, ducks, turkeys, parrots, inside pets, etc. So I should have been able to identify them pretty well, but they were unlike anything that I've ever heard. If you take anything from this, then please avoid going outside alone at night with a bad flashlight and unarmed. I hope that this doesn't happen again to me, but eventually I'm going to have to take Buddy for another walk. So my grandma and I live in a small 2-bedroom house, and honestly, I hate it. I cannot leave my room at night without a light because I always feel like I'm being watched. Without a light is even worse, and I get chills and I feel sick to my stomach with anxiety that I'm in fact being watched. Around the same time every night, without fail, I can also hear something on my roof. I discarded it as cats at first, but there's no way that it's cats because there's no way for them to really get on the roof without injury. Around 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. I can hear thumps and they sound like a man is walking up there. They move across the whole house. Sometimes they're loud and sometimes they're not. My dog at one point was crying to go outside, and of course I couldn't just not let her out. So me and my dog went outside, and it was around 3 in the morning. I was talking to my dog the whole time because I felt more comfortable doing so. But eventually I realized that I sounded sort of insane and stopped. But man, do I wish that I hadn't have, because I could then hear snoring. Once I realized something was snoring and knew the direction of the snore, I made the mistake of flashing my light towards it. I felt like I was in danger, and it's a hard thing to describe because you just need to know the feeling, but I got my dog back inside and that feeling just never went away. I went straight into my room and I shook in my bed. In the past, when I was younger, I would hear the thumps and I would get scared, bury myself in the blankets because if I was hiding, then it couldn't hurt me, but now I sort of just get a spike of anxiety that doesn't seem to go away until like 1 in the morning. I talked to my grandma about it once and she told me to just ignore it because it would just go away. She covers the windows every night with blinds and a blanket, but with her old age, she can no longer do this. I asked her why she did this at one point, and she explained that it was because it couldn't see in if she did this. I want to start covering up the windows myself, but she advised me not to because it's too much work. I want to bring up the thumps again, but I'm scared that she'll say the same thing as before and just sort of discard it. My dog is a big girl and she hates loud noises. She is my protector, but she's also a big chicken without a doubt. She growls when she hears the thumping though, and will crawl into my bed and protective stand over me, sort of. The only way that I can get her to stop is by petting her and telling her that it's okay. Whatever is around my house though, it has my dog very upset. I don't know if it's a person or something else, but whatever the case, I would really like some advice. I moved to California in May. Having lived in Utah most of my life, this was a big change. Where I'm from is fairly safe. I could walk home at night and usually not worry too much. Everyone has warned me how dangerous this area can be, and to be vigilant. I carry pepper spray with me, and I've never really had any issues. That is until tonight. So I ride the fast transit train system pretty often, usually at least a few times a week. To get there from my apartment, I have to walk about a mile, most of which is an enclosed trail that runs behind a neighborhood and next to the train tracks. There's one entrance on one end, one in the middle, and the other end opens up to the train station parking lot. Last week, as I was walking home at around 10, I had to walk past a man who was pretty obviously homeless. It seemed like he was looking for something that he'd lost, and he was talking to himself. I had to walk past him to get home, so I try to just put my head down and quickly walk past. But he blocks my way, saying, "Excuse me, hey, did you see this thing about this big," gestures with his hands, "when you were walking through here?" Confused, I say, what? No, sorry," and hurriedly walk away. I can hear him trying to talk more to me, but I kept going and he luckily didn't follow. A few days later, I encountered him again on the same trail, and he tried to talk to me again, but I just said, "Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about," and kept going. Well, tonight I walk onto the train station and he's coming out of the elevator as I'm going down the escalator and starts yelling at me, "Excuse me, wait ma'am." I ignore him, but he follows me and won't leave me alone, so I turn around and say, "What?" He says, "Hey, did you see my speaker? Since you were on the trail that night." I tell him no, that I don't know what he's talking about. He then says, "Well, can I look in your backpack real quick, because you're looking really guilty right now?" I tell him no, and he then gets mad and takes a step towards me. So I pull out my pepper spray and tell him, "Leave me alone or I'll pepper spray you." He starts yelling about how he doesn't care and how I better not have his stuff, but he walks away eventually. I walk to the far end of the platform away from him and call my roommate and tell her what's happening. That is when the guy walks up holding a hatchet that he tries to hide under his jacket, and I hold up my pepper spray and stand up and tell him to back up because I'm not playing around anymore. He puts his hands up and backs away. My roommate calls the transit police for me. I can hear the guy screaming somewhere upstairs in the station. Luckily, my train pulled up right then and I hopped on. I really hope that I don't see this guy again and that this was the last time that I have to interact with him. Because quite honestly, I do not have this guy's speakers. I was around 12 years old and sitting on the back of my dad's truck with the tailgate down. I was waiting on my friend to meet up with me so that we could go and do whatever 12-year-olds do on a weekend. It was a spring day in Georgia, so everything was alive and pretty noisy. Dogs were barking, birds were chirping, and bugs were screaming. After sitting there for a while, everything just goes silent all of a sudden. There wasn't even a peep. I look around to see if there were any birds or dogs around me, but there wasn't. When I turned back to look at the street, there was a black, misty, shapeless form walking from my neighbors across the street from me to their neighbor's yard. As I'm watching it move, I whispered in disbelief, "What the heck is that?" Apparently it heard me too, because it stopped as soon as I said it and looked like it was turning towards me, although it was shapeless and it was thinner while moving and kind of thickened out like a normal person would when you look at them head on. It stood there though for what felt like a while, and I'm guessing that it stared me down. My heart was beating very fast and I don't think that I was breathing this time. It started to move towards me and was about to step into the street when I heard my friend yell to me from up the street. The way the houses were built, she couldn't see the side of the street with the form. I snap my head to her and raise my hand so that she knows that I'm there, and I immediately go back to look for the form, but when I did, it wasn't there anymore. Once I saw that it was gone, everything all of a sudden came back to life, it seemed. All the noise expected at springtime hit me at once, and I became extremely overwhelmed, and I even started to cry. My friend reached me and saw that I was crying. She was rightfully confused and asked why I was so upset. I told her everything that I experienced, and she got really quiet. She told me that she had seen it too, not long before I did at her house. She lived a street over, and told me that she was terrified during the encounter. She said that it started to move towards her from her neighbor's yard, like me, into hers, and she was completely frozen. She broke out of that trance because her mum told her that she needed to come inside for dinner now, and when she looked back, just like me, it was gone. Because we were so spooked by that, we decided that it was a good day to have a movie marathon. I never did see it again, but I do believe that I had other encounters with it. I am pretty skeptical, but open to the idea that paranormal and interdimensional entities can or do actually exist, but I always try to debunk why or if paranormal things happen, weird sounds, bumps, etc. Anyways, when I was around 10 or 13 years old, I cannot actually remember the exact age, my sister and I were playfully chasing each other, just around the house and playing hide and seek, and it was my turn to count and go look for her. I returned to the living room, like a den area but wider space, and this room was where the base or safe spot was when the hider tries to avoid you. I finished up counting, and as I was saying, ready or not, here I come, I remember getting this weird feeling just sort of overcoming me, like I was being watched. I whipped my head around to look behind me, and there in one of the corners of the room was a short, probably 4 foot, pale, dark cloaked but no hood covering their facial features, scared looking bald man, staring at me huddled in the corner, like they were scared and surprised I was able to see them. It definitely was not human from what I can remember, and I was able to discern quickly in my head that it presented male-like qualities and features. I didn't feel any malevolence from this being or ill intentions, but as quickly as I blinked after seeing it, whatever it was gone. And I remember being confused for a bit, but my brain went back to just wanting to play. I do recall avoiding that spot in the corner for a while, and feeling scared to get close to it, and my mum asked what was going on with why I was acting sort of weary of the corner, and I told her about the figure, but she said that it could have been my imagination, and I just left it at that. I'm not sure why it's bothering me lately, but just wondering if anyone has had a similar experience or knows anything, legends, myths, etc., about a small, pale, hunched-over, cloaked and scared-looking bald man in the corner. Although it certainly could have been just a child's imagination, I really don't think it was. So, I want to start off by saying that I don't believe in anything paranormal or supernatural. I'm definitely a man of science and believe everything can be explained by it. But, with that said, I still don't understand what I actually saw. I live in Lubbock, Texas, and next to my town there's another smaller town about 20 minutes out called Wilson. Me and my 3 friends were just hanging out one cold night and saw that it was getting late, about 3ish in the morning. My friend lived in Wilson at the time, so we decided to drop off first to get that long drive out of the way, and after we dropped him off, we got back on the highway heading back into our town. As soon as we got onto the interstate, we entered some misty fog. Well, we had drove this trip plenty of times before, but this time we noticed something different standing right on the grassy median. What we saw was a figure of a person, dressed in an all-white gown with long straight black hair, facing away from us. I was driving and decided to slow down to get a better look. The second that we got close to the figure, it turned its head like an owl to reveal the pale face of a woman, screaming at us, then jumped in front of the car and flew up using their giant white wings. It wasn't a gown at all, in fact. It was wings covering her entire body. I don't know if it was just me, but I could feel her eyes burning a hole in mine when she looked at us. The image of this giant bird woman still haunts me to this day. At the time, we were at a loss for words. We didn't understand what had just happened, and in a matter of a few seconds, we witnessed some, unexplainable creature, and just as fast as it appeared, it was gone. So, if anyone else has had a similar experience, then please feel free to share it with me. This woman has been living rent-free in my mind for years now, and I really just want to figure out what that thing was. Seven or 8 years ago, I stayed overnight at Waverly Hills Sanitarium with some friends. We really had a blast, but other than accidentally frightening ourselves, really not much happened. That is, until just before dawn while we were in the surgery on the 4th or 5th floor. I looked out the window and I saw what I first thought was an injured dog, then possibly a wounded deer because it was bigger than a dog. It was sort of scuttling around down there like a crab and just looked, wrong. After a few seconds, it came out of the shadows and I got a better look at it. It looked like a very tall, thin humanoid doing the crab walk, bent over backwards with its face looking up at me. I couldn't make out any features, but it sure felt like it was looking right at me. Then it scuttled off into the shadows again. It happened so fast that I didn't have time to say anything, but when I turned around, one of my friends was standing behind me, and he said, "Did you just see that?" We were both stunned and didn't tell anyone else at first. I asked the tour guide if people ever reported seeing things on the grounds, and he replied with, "People see things crawling around down there all the time." And well, that was certainly a bit of a shock. That's my story, and I wish there was more to it, but I'm kind of glad that there isn't. It's a weird event in my life that I don't think I'll ever forget. In 2006, I went on a choir tour of Spain and France. The tour started in Madrid and ended in the Occitan region. This experience happened in Lourdes, France. Already in Spain, I was having many déjà vu experiences and memories of past life recall. One of the strangest experiences was visiting the Cathedral of Burgos and being able to talk with a tour guide with complete familiarity about the church. At the end of the tour, she said, "You know a lot." I even took some of our group who didn't do the paid tour back the next day and did the entire thing exactly as she had done the day before. But the most unequivocal paranormal experience happened in Lourdes. Lourdes is a small town in southwestern France that is famous for Saint Bernadette, a teenage shepherdess who had visions of the Virgin Mary in 1858. On our first day in Lourdes, our tour guide told us about how it had been a Roman outpost before Christianity with a temple to the water goddess. This is important because all of the imagery of Lourdes is water imagery. There's a huge tank of water to be dunked in to heal the sick. Everywhere you look, there are bottles in the shape of the Virgin Mary. Your travel through the town is constantly interrupted by streams and rivers of people. You get the idea. Sick Catholics flock to Lourdes for pilgrimage and healing. It's extremely common to see groups of people in wheelchairs and even on stretchers at the sites, especially the grotto where Bernadette had her visions, and on top of which the Church of Lourdes is built. This is the main pilgrimage site. Now, although I'm not a Catholic, the tour guide had piqued my curiosity and I decided to go down to the grotto to vibe it out. In front of the grotto was an empty space followed by 5 or 6 rows of benches, with more empty space behind it. All of this was fenced in. When I got there, I wasn't able to go into the grotto because it was the designated time for stretchers. The benches in the center were full, but there was a bench at the very back against the fence where I decided to sit and just wait. The minute that I sat down, though, I began to feel a buzzing sensation that only got stronger and stronger. The energy was so strong that it pushed my head down towards my knees. Through the buzz, I then heard this voice, "You will see where Bernadette saw the lady for the very first time." As usual, I was pretty skeptical, but I took it under consideration. At around this time, the stretchers moved out of the area and people started lining up from the benches in the center. I moved to those center benches, starting at the left corner, until it filled up. And as it did, I slid down the bench until I was sort of sitting at the far right corner of it. Once there, I thought maybe I should say some kind of oblation, so I started singing the choral version of Ave Maria that we were singing on our tour in my head. And as I did so, the buzzing vibration became overwhelming and I started silently crying. The entire bench held space for me while I cried without ever speaking to or touching me. After I finished crying, I knew that I didn't need to go into the grotto. I had my Lord's Grotto experience, and that was enough for me. When I reached down to get my backpack, though, I saw a bronze plaque on the ground, which said, "This is where Saint Bernadette saw the Virgin Mary for the first time on the 11th of February, 1858. Which means that I had been sitting on the spot the entire time. It was a strange experience, and I still don't really know what to think about all of it. I'll never forget the buzzing feeling that had occurred and also hearing the voices, but yeah, I know it sounds crazy and all that, but it really happened to me and I don't really share it with many people. So I was around 8 when we moved into an old house or sort of shop combination. The bottom is a commercial building with a big open room, a kitchen, and 2 medium-sized rooms connected to each other and one connected to the open room. Upstairs is the living space. The layout of the bottom is fairly important, but also the kitchen leads into the stairs, but you cannot see the kitchen from the open room. So we moved in, and from the start I despised the place. I just got bad, horrible, dare I say, energy from the place, and I don't tend to get those. In the open room, there was a large painting with a strange representation of what would seem to be a rapture experience or event. It was a burning cross on top of a large Bible, a church with a crowd surrounding it, and a river on fire. Every time I would walk by this painting, my stomach sank horribly. Imagine watching someone that you love die. It was that sort of feeling. We got rid of this painting very soon after we left, but the energy from that spot just remained. The previous owners were an older couple, but the husband had died about 5 years before we moved in, leaving the lady as a widow. She was strange, to say the least. They had lived there for like 2 decades, and she was just so emotionless. Obviously, this could have been grief, but it was 5 years ago that he died. She was extremely emotionless, as if she was dead in the body of a living person, and had this look in her eyes, as if she had seen unimaginable things. Anyways, we moved in nonetheless, and there were already problems. Everywhere that you were upstairs, you would always feel like you were being watched by something, but always watched. There was a mirror in front of the stairs that I swear was cursed. I just couldn't look at that thing without having a panic attack. My room, when dark, I literally couldn't look into, like my body just sort of restricted me. The lady that lived there too really did not clean the place ever. The lady that lived there as well never cleaned the place. There were strangely piles of flies everywhere as well. They seemed like they were an offering of some sort, the way that they were laid out in a perfect mound like that. But anyway, there actually weren't many, but the few events that did happen were major. For one, soon after we moved in, my aunt came over. My aunt is more like an older sister, a long story, but Soon after she left, she told me at a family gathering that when she was there, she saw a four-legged creature that had the face of a humanoid, but long stretched hind legs and long teeth. You might think that she was just trying to scare me, I know that, but she really just isn't the type. Then we took a photo of nothing important, but just a photo, and in this photo, there was a face in it, a humanoid face that was completely pale, like completely white, pitch black eyes, and no hair. The structure was an oval, but a human head, I guess, like a stretched oval. And the next day, literally, my mum and I went down to the cellar. The cellar door was next to the spot that had the large painting in it. When we went into the cellar, the door locked behind us. And this really surprised us because the door's lock had 2 steps that couldn't be done by accident. It was a chain with like a little latch thing that you pretty much see everywhere, but when we closed the door, the chain was down near the floor and nowhere near the latch. But when the door closed behind us, that latch was locked. This happened when me and my mum were home alone, with nobody able to let us out for like hours as well. Therefore, we were trapped for hours down there. This was the last straw for us, and after that, we decided to move out. I still cannot wrap my head around what I saw and felt and heard in my head. If there's any way to debunk this, then please do let me know. I live in a rural area in Florida. This happened a few weeks ago, and I was driving by myself at around midnight. I came to a stoplight where there's a cemetery on the right and new apartment buildings on the left as well. This particular light is extremely long since it's not activated by sensors when you pull up at the light. So I'm waiting for a few minutes, and all of a sudden I instinctively sort of look behind me. It felt like someone was watching me intently. About 30 feet away from where I was waiting for the light is a bus stop behind me. Right in front of the benches where you wait for the bus, I see a huge figure that looks like a wolf or a giant dog. I'm staring at it, thinking to myself, wow, that's an enormous dog. All the while I start to feel goosebumps. I feel my heart start racing, and I just cannot figure out why. I then start to feel, and bear with me here, evil thoughts in my head. I say feel because I couldn't make out what the words were being said. I just remember while I was staring at this dog that I felt like it was mocking me, laughing and sort of challenging me. Then I see the figure stand up on 2 legs while staring in my direction. It stood up and was suddenly taller than the top of the bus overhang, but it didn't look like a human. It looked like an animal just started standing on 2 legs. Meanwhile, I'm still waiting for this light to turn green, and keep in mind there's lights all around the bus stop, but this figure was absolutely pure black. The figure was stood up on 2 legs, and now it looked like a huge dog with an alpaca neck and body, but the neck looked really girthy as well. I see this thing continue to stare in my direction, and I think to myself, okay, this is really weird, but even if it is my imagination, it's going to disappear when I start driving. The whole time I'm feeling panicked, and I hear in my head, run, but I can chase you. I step on the gas and get out of there. The light is still red, mind you, but I didn't care at that point, and drive away as quickly as I can. And then I looked behind me as I was driving in my rearview mirror, and this figure is sprinting at full speed on all 4s behind me. It looked like a deranged wolf was chasing me. I felt pure panic as I was speeding away, and maybe out of instinct I yelled, "I have God with me, you can't hurt me, nothing can hurt me, I'm protected by my angels and by God." Paraphrasing there, but it was at that point that I realized I was feeling like I was being choked. Because after I said that out loud, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't feel like I was being chased anymore, and when I looked back, the thing was gone. Now, am I going insane here? I do believe in the paranormal, and I actually still believe in skinwalkers as well, but I honestly hope that I was just imagining things because this happened 2 minutes from my house. Please let me know what you think about this, and if you have any advice for me, then I would love to hear it. So this happened on Saturday. I, a 29-year-old female, live in a decent neighborhood. Not the best, but definitely not usually thought of as super dangerous or anything. It wasn't even that late, to be honest, like 9:30 p.m., and it's summer in my country, so it's been dark for an hour or two at most. I had left my friend taking transport back home, and since my friend had left in a rush, there was something that I wanted to tell her that I felt that I would forget once I was home. But I got my phone taken from my hands a few months ago, so I was waiting until I was in a safe place to take it out. So I turn a corner. There's literally 1 block to my house, and this is a pretty small street, mind you. I thought that I was safe, and suddenly someone talks to me. His words were slurred, so I didn't quite get what he said. It was dark too, but after a moment, I understood that he was telling me to give him my phone, or my wallet or something. I stared, and despite the darkness, I saw something in his hand which he was holding very much like a gun. I think it may have been fake, but still, it terrified me. For some reason, I looked around, and not so far away, walking towards me, was another woman. I screamed for help and ran away from the man, all the while bracing myself for the pain in case the gun wasn't fake. And then the woman yelled at me to stop running and to go inside of the building closest to us, and we did. There, after having a panic attack, the woman told me that the man had been next to a car that I didn't see because I was so fixated on the possible gun. Now, I doubt that the man wanted anything other than my phone, but still, the fact that he had a quick and easy escape and that there is a possibility that I could have lost more than just my cell phone, that scares me. I honestly thank God for that woman that day, because without her, I don't know what would have happened. So when I was in high school, my friends and I were into really spooky stuff that we honestly had no business messing around with. We would visit cemeteries at night, go to our small town's local haunt spots to try and stir up any urban legends. But the story that I'm about to tell made us pretty much quit cold turkey, trying to seek out the paranormal. So one night, we were over at our friend's century-old home, and I mean, it was old and creaky and the perfect setting for a night of Ouija board. We brought it out, and for the first half hour, nothing insane happened, just some basic movement from the planchette. Then, feeling smug, I asked the spirits what my middle name was. The thing is, my middle name is literally made up by my parents. It's not a real name. No one in the circle knew, let alone could spell my middle name. There was literally no way that someone could even guess it. But somehow, the board knew. It spelt my middle name perfectly, and I could feel my heart fall into my gut at that point. Keep in mind, my hands were not on the planchette, so I couldn't have actually moved it myself either. Everyone laughed because what a silly middle name that would be, but I had to confess that it was mine. And the color drained from everybody's faces immediately. Then, all of a sudden, a glass ashtray that was sitting a few feet away on the coffee table split clean in two, and at that, we were done. We left the house to go stay somewhere else, and fortunately, I've never experienced anything that terrifying ever again. So I lived in a house where what I can only describe as unexplainable things occurred. It was a double, and I rented the bottom, and my sister and my newborn nephew, they lived in the unit on the top. Crazy and unexplained things just kept happening too. For example, one time I was knocking on my sister's door and no one would answer. The door was locked, and I figured that she was in the back bedroom and just couldn't hear me. So I knocked louder, and finally I could hear someone walking down the stairs to unlock the door to let me in. Only when I opened the door, there's nobody in there. I go upstairs and find my sister and nephew asleep. When I wake up my sister, she has no clue what I'm talking about and no clue who let me in, but she tells me that somehow her son keeps getting out of this very large crib without a scratch on him or even a bump or a sound. It was just completely impossible for a newborn to get out of his crib, but it happened again when I was babysitting. It still scares me to think about it because it was just impossible to escape a crib like this, and if he somehow could climb out, he would be hurt really badly too. I went to check on him and he was sitting in the floor completely fine, just chilling like he wasn't alone. Stuff like this kept happening too, and then one day, somebody shows up while we're standing on the porch and they tell us their name and ask if their W-2s had been sent there. Apparently they were the previous tenants. We did find the mail that he was looking for too, proving that he was who he said that he was. He refused to step on the property though and told us that we need to be out of that house as soon as possible. He told us that his mum lost her mind from living in that house and will never be the same. After everything we'd experienced, how could we not believe him too? We were a month-to-month lease, and after that we got out as soon as we could. I like to think of myself as a rational and logical person, and just have never been able to explain to myself what the heck was going on in that house. So I've been debating about whether to share this or not, but I finally decided that it's been long enough for me to talk about this. It all happened to me and my mum a few months ago, back in October. It happened in a very rural part of New Hampshire, like a side road on a side road type of neighborhood. It was pouring out, as it had been raining for pretty much the whole day. My mum had just gotten back from down the street in my sister's car, and I was on the couch in the living room when suddenly I heard the doorbell ring. Our front door has a huge glass pane in the front, so we can look out from the inside, and someone can look in from the outside too. And through this window pane, I see a man. I didn't get a great look at him as I didn't have my long-distance glasses on, but the man noticed that I had seen him and waved as if he was trying to be friendly. For the rest of this too, I'll refer to this guy as Poncho Man. So I got up and thought about opening the door for Poncho Man, but relented. As I couldn't properly see who it was, I didn't want to let a stranger in the house, obviously. So instead, I went down the hall to my parents' bedroom where my mum was getting ready for work. She asked what was up, and I explained to her that a man in a poncho was outside of our door and wanted to talk to us. She went as white as a ghost. Immediately, she stopped getting ready, closed and locked the bedroom door, and started checking the windows to make sure that they were locked. I asked her what was going on, and my mum explained that she was driving home. She had seen the Poncho Man, and he'd been standing motionless on the side of the main road. And as soon as my mum turned down the road, he started to walk, presumably to follow her. She said that the encounter, while being weird, she didn't think too much of it. But why would someone be out there in the pouring rain, down a back road in the afternoon of all things? It was like he was waiting for something. Hearing this, I started to panic a bit as well. My mum called my aunt, the two are like best friends, and asked what she should do. My aunt told her to call the police immediately, and so we did. We proceeded to pace around the bedroom, frantically looking out the windows to see if we could see Poncho Man. From where the bedroom was angled, it was impossible to look at the front porch and see if he was still there, but we were desperate for anything. After what felt like hours, we finally saw a police car pull up. We carefully unlocked the door and went down to let the officer in. We explained what we saw, and he agreed to do a scan around the neighborhood. As he left, I noticed that there was something on the doorknob, though. I took it off, and it was a political ad for a candidate that was running for office. It's possible that Poncho Man was just campaigning for the candidate, but there are a lot of holes in that story. Like, it was pouring out, so why would you go door to door in pouring rain? And why would you go that route in such a rural neighborhood? The houses are so far apart that you could barely make a dent on foot. The time doesn't make sense either. I mean, sure, I and my mum were home, but it was about 4 in the afternoon. Most people would still be at work, so you'd probably get no response from knocking anyway. Eventually, too, the officer returned and he had found the guy down the road and had questioned him. Poncho Man was able to ID himself, and he claimed that he was a political campaigner and was just knocking on doors for that reason. But when probed further, conveniently enough, Poncho Man couldn't provide any other door signs, as the one that he had left on our house was the last one apparently. That makes the campaign story even more absurd. I mean, our house is in the middle of the street. It's not like we were the last by any means, so why wouldn't you bring enough for the whole street? Even the officer pointed this out to us and said that it was definitely unusual behavior. Although the officer was suspicious of him, there wasn't really anything that he could do about it, as there was no way to prove intent. He told us, though, to be alert and not to hesitate to call if Poncho Man returns. Anyway, fast forward a few weeks and I start noticing that a police car seems to be permanently stationed down the road from us, about a 3-minute drive. I got curious one day and asked my mum about it, and she said that there were multiple break-ins into the houses down the road apparently, and the police were doing a sort of sting operation. The Poncho Man encounter and the break-ins may be unrelated, but considering how Poncho Man acted, I have a sinking feeling that somehow they're all connected. Thankfully, for the past few months, we've heard and seen nothing of Poncho Man. We eventually got a new doorbell system with a camera, and the police left the area where they were doing the sting, and I hope that this whole situation is over and done with, and that I never have to meet Poncho Man ever again. This happened roughly 8 years ago now. I was hanging out with some friends for one of our friends' birthdays. We had gone out for a stroll to our local dock to wait for our weed guy. We were all 16 or 17. This is important too because we were not under the influence at this time. When we arrived at the dock, we hung out for a bit talking and waiting for our weed guy. My buddy gets a text from him saying to meet him in a different spot because he was held up at another place. The rest of my friends agreed to walk there, whereas I was an overweight kid and kind of lazy at the time. I didn't want to walk the 1.5 miles to pick up the smoke, and so I elected to stay at the docks because they planned on returning to smoke by the lake anyway. Fast forward about 10 minutes after they left, and I'm sitting on a bench looking out over the water when I look to the right, down the length of the lake, and see a white orb floating maybe 150 feet over the lake. I immediately got this, gut feeling of being extremely uncomfortable looking at this white orb, and begun to walk back to where my friends were supposed to go. I made it to the train tracks that headed out of the dock area when I heard "hey" and my name. I turned around to see 4 figures that I couldn't quite make out, walking out behind one of the boats on the shore, waving. This was how many of my friends were with me before they left too. But anyway, the next thing that I know, I'm completely turned around from the direction that I was heading out of the dock area. I hear sounds coming from the fence line to my right, which is my friends yelling my name and asking where I was. Not to mention that between the time of seeing the figures walk out from behind the boat to hearing my friends, about 40 minutes had passed, and to this day, I don't know what happened to that time that I lost. I would love to hear your thoughts, and if you have any idea of what might have happened. Back in 2013, I had just started an education journey, and after the first school period, I had to be out and find an internship to be able to progress. But at the time, it proved to be almost impossible to get one, so while I was looking, I decided to take another job just to make sure that we had food on the table. After searching for a while, I found out that a friend of my fiance's family had his own handicap bus company, a kind of taxi service for wheelchair users or otherwise disabled people. And he needed someone to cover the night shift since it was a bus that had to be on call at least 22 hours a day. And seeing that I'm quite the night owl, I immediately told him that I'd be happy to take the job, and after I got the needed license, I was hired. The job was pretty basic. Pick people up and drop them off where they needed to go, and sometimes use a machine to get wheelchairs up or down from stairs, and when there was no trips, I drove to a designated area and did whatever I wanted while waiting. I quickly found a truck stop in the area too, where I could park and catch some Z's while waiting. There was a gas station where I could buy coffee in the early hours of the shift, and on the other side of the gas station's parking lot, on the opposite side of the truck stop, there was a rundown restaurant with a motel connected to it. To not disturb the sleeping truckers if I got a trip in the middle of the night, I usually parked on the restaurant side. So after parking there every night for a while, I noticed one particular room had a lot of people come and go in, and in the beginning I thought nothing of it. But then one night, in the end of the summer, while I was half asleep with the window slightly open, I suddenly heard yelling coming from the motel, and a dude came tumbling out of the room and started running. And a few seconds later, a big dude came running after him with something in his hand. I couldn't make out what it was, but I thought that it was none of my business and went back to my half-sleeping waiting stage. Not much time passed and my phone went off, and I had a trip an hour's drive away, so I turned on the bus and was leaving the parking lot when I saw the big guy coming around the corner. The rest of the night I had back-to-back trips, so I didn't park until I got home. The day after, I didn't get a return to home zone until 2 or 3 in the morning. When I arrived at the parking lot, the area where I used to park had fist-sized rocks strewn all over the place. Not connecting the dots at the time too, I just parked a few spots over and started waiting. I fell asleep pretty fast, but was jerked back into reality when a car light in front of my bus honked its horn. They also then flashed the high beams and revved its engine. I thought it was just some idiot who noticed me sleeping and found it funny trying to make me scared, so I jumped out of the bus about to tell him to get lost, but instead of driving off or stopping, the driver made the start brake thing with the car, indicating that I was the one who should get lost. And then, that was the moment that I connected the dots. Not wanting to seem like a pushover though, I stood still and stared at the car. Not that I could actually see anything with the high beams almost blinding me, and after what seemed like a really long time, but must not have been more than 30 seconds, the car drove off. After that, I decided to park near the trucks from then on in. So, a month or so passed and nothing had happened since the car episode, and I figured that nothing more would if I just kept parking by the trucks. But then one night, I had a long 12-hour shift on a Sunday, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and I didn't have time to eat dinner before work that day, and during the first half of my shift, I had back-to-back trips with no time to eat, so when I got a return to home zone, I quickly parked in the far end of the almost empty truck stop and got ready to eat my now very late dinner that my fiancé had packed for me. I wanted to watch some TV on my phone and while eating, so I sat on my back against the driver's side door and got comfy, but while turning my back to the door, I had accidentally hit the door lock with my elbow. And that was my luck, because as I was sitting there scrolling Netflix on my phone, I suddenly felt the bus rock and heard the clack of the door handle behind me smack back in position. I quickly turned and saw a dude with a hood over his head, quickly crouching and proceeding to lay down on the ground crawling under the bus, with a huge kitchen knife in his right hand. I quickly got up and made sure the other 2 doors were locked, and then I looked in all directions to see if I could spot him. He was still under the bus, and I was sure as heck not jumping out this time, since the knife made his intentions pretty dang clear. Instead, I turned on the engine, turned on the spots on the back of the bus, and looked around to see if I'd scared him off, and luckily for me, it seemed that it did. I saw him run off and into a bushy or woody area at the end of the truck stop, and after that, I never parked at that truck stop ever again. I also always made sure that all the doors were locked every time that I was parked and trying to relax. So I went to the grocery store early one morning, and when I was checking out, there was an elderly gentleman in front of me. He was wearing a veteran's hat. He started making casual conversation with me about prices and how, when he was young like me, the prices were super low. He was much older, so people around him, the cashier and some other gentlemen, helped him bag his groceries and whatnot, and he didn't have much, but it was hard for him to keep his balance. He almost fell at one point, held onto my arm and apologized to me for doing so. I told him that it was okay and to have a great day. I also didn't have many things, so I began to walk out of the store, and eventually I caught up to him, as he couldn't walk very fast. So I asked him if he wanted me to walk him to his car, and he told me that he had rode his bike because he was forced to turn his driver's license due to his age. I was impressed that he had rode his bike and asked him where he lived. He told me he lived about 15 minutes away, on bike that is. I asked him if he wanted a ride. He was elderly and didn't seem like a threat at all, and he accepted. So I popped my trunk open so that he could put his bike in. We were struggling when another man who was about to walk into the store saw and helped us. He thanked the elderly man for his service and proceeded to go inside. Now, on the way, he asked if we could stop by Carl's Jr. to get a new combo his wife saw on TV and had asked him to bring her back one. He called his wife and asked her what the name of the combos was. Once we got to the drive-thru, we ordered and I offered to pay, and he thanked me again. On the way to his house, he asked me what I do for a living. I told him that I'm paralegal, and he asked for my number because he was trying to sue the state of California and a detective who was now retired. I gave him my number and then asked him about his potential case. He then proceeded to tell me that he had been in jail in the 70s for false rape allegations apparently, and that the detective working on the case really had it out for him. I was shocked, but working in the legal field, it's not that uncommon for me to see these types of situations. When we got to his house, his wife was waiting outside. She was also elderly, and she thanked me for giving her husband a ride and seemed excited to have someone there. I had gotten out of the car and to get his bike out of my trunk, so she asked me if she could show me their front yard, leading all the way up to their backyard. She said that her and her husband worked on their home for many years, and she seemed very proud of her home. I told them that I did have to leave, but that it was nice to meet them, and then she insisted. So in the end, I let them show me around, and when we got to the backyard, they opened the back sliding door and asked if I wanted to come in for some orange juice. I kindly declined, and I suddenly got a very weird feeling, but I brushed it off. They told me that I could come in and set my purse down if I wanted. My purse is a crossbody bag, so I hadn't even realized that I still had it on. Anyway, they insist for me to come in. Mind you, they're super elderly, so I did. They began to show me their wedding photos on the walls, and as we're walking through the home, the elderly man shows me all the doors, and the doors have all of these crazy type of contraptions, and he says, "Look, so nobody can break out." Now, mind you, he definitely said break out and not break in, and at this point, my gut was screaming at me to get out of there. He then said, "Come right this way. I want to show you how we converted this room." My fight or flight response kicked in at this point, and I don't know how I figured it out, but I was able to undo the contraptions from the front door and broke out of there. I ran to my car that was sitting in the driveway, and I drove away as fast as I could. I went the opposite direction from where my house was, but all I cared about was to get as far away as possible, fast. When I got home, I was shaken, and I got several phone calls from him and voicemails asking why I had left so sudden and if I was okay. I blocked his number and called my cousin to tell her what had happened, and to this day, I don't know, was I almost kidnapped? I mean, they were extremely old, but maybe somebody else was in the house. Maybe someone much younger and stronger. Or maybe the whole thing was just an act. I don't know, but something about the whole situation just didn't feel right. Also, they told me at the time that they didn't have any children, but when I did some research online, I found out that they do have a daughter and a granddaughter who happens to be a local news reporter here in town. And the fact that they lied about that really only adds to all of my suspicions. About 2 years ago, a group of my friends went out to a concert. We had a good time, plenty to drink, and the concert had ended and we were just outside trying to figure out a place to cure our drunchies. We were standing in a circle on the sidewalk and our friend group consisted of 7 guys and 1 girl. Now, some random guy comes up and stands way too close to the girl in our group. We didn't know what he was doing and it was really odd. All 7 of us guys just stared at him like, "What the heck are you doing?" He noticed us staring at him and silently left at that point. Our friend Lexi had a disgusted look on her face and told us that he was standing so close that she could feel his boner on her leg. As he gets further up the street, we see him approach another woman who ignores him and keeps going her way. He then turns around and starts coming back to where we were and walks past us staring at our friend Lexi, and we tell him to keep it moving, creep. About 2 minutes later, we hear a woman screaming and our whole group sprinting towards the screams. He's fully on top of a woman and there's a guy laying on the ground next to the woman screaming. My friend instantly jumps on his back and gets him in a headlock and starts pulling him off of the woman. I was fuming with anger and disgust and just started hitting on this guy in the face multiple times while my friend had him in a headlock. At this point, the guy is basically unconscious, so we stop and we leave him lying there on the concrete. The guy who was laying on the concrete next to the woman being assaulted then all of a sudden wakes up, apparently he'd been knocked out or something, and comes over and kicks this guy. And apparently the creeper came up to this guy and the woman and started trying to touch the woman, saying that he wants to, have his way with her. And well, the guy and the woman were boyfriend and girlfriend, so obviously the guy wasn't about to have this. But they were out celebrating his birthday and he was super drunk and unable to defend himself. The creeper punched the guy in the face and instantly knocked him out, and had taken the woman to the ground and began assaulting her, which is when we showed up. Quite honestly, I'm just thankful that we were around at that point, and showed up quickly as it could have been so much worse. I normally don't condone violence at all too, but sometimes it really is the only option. It was 1995. My family and I had moved into a new house in a fairly new suburb at the time. My parents thought of it as the perfect split-level house, spacious and family-friendly, even with an outdoor spa as well. They bought the house as second owners from a couple with 3 kids who were divorcing, and we were a pretty happy family. From the first day that we moved in, though, my parents complained about bees in a wall. They had a pest removalist come and exterminate the bees. Same night, my mum had a dream of a woman with long black hair looking like a gypsy with a red dress chasing her. She didn't think too much of it, obviously, as it was just a dream after all. I had a cousin come and stay with us from overseas a year later, and we recently found out that he told another family member after going back to his country about seeing a lady at ours, and it was the same description that he gave as my mum saw in her dream. After that, weird things started happening too. My dad had troubles as his close-knit brothers and a sister who came to our house with their families almost every weekend turned on him without warning. His personality gradually changed too as he became arrogant and angry. He died young and suddenly at home in 2001, which forced us all to move house. Our front pergola caved in, I was having issues at school, my brother was always sick, and the birds in our aviary were dying one by one all the time, even after my dad had just bought them as young ones. I had even seen a faint spectre of a woman from my dining room upon coming home from school by the front door. I stared at it until it disappeared through the front door as soon as my dad came home from work. But the last night in our home, my mum dreamt of the same woman again saying goodbye. The weirdest thing, though, was that at our new house, there were no issues. We heard from our old neighbors, though, that our next-door neighbor's granddaughter unfortunately took her own life on their property. 6 degrees of separation, I eventually worked with a lady whose son married one of the 3 girls of the divorced couple who sold us that house. Her daughter-in-law's mother relayed information through her that confirmed my suspicions too. And I have since been doing some research via libraries and the local council for information, as I'm still intrigued about this place to this day. So, it makes me question, what actually happened on that property or land before the house was built? Was there a murder that took place there, or even the gypsy woman's body buried underneath the house or something? Was the gypsy woman's intent to ruin people's happiness? Did my dad get possessed by something? And of course, how are the owners who bought from us going with their own experiences there? If I find out that information, I'll be sure to let you guys know. So last night at around 5 a.m, I was asleep and I heard a lot of the dogs in the neighborhood, including mine, barking. I tried to ignore them because, they do that sometimes. They bark for pretty much anything and everything. But a couple of seconds later, I think that I hear what sounds like people yelling, at least two different people. I'm obviously still half asleep, so at first I'm thinking that it's a bunch of teenagers just being rowdy and annoying. I used to do stuff like that too. But then I'm starting to understand what they're saying. It sounds more like they're arguing, and I'm starting to wake up at this. I grab my phone and I call the police. I'm on the phone with the dispatch and hear what sounds like a woman screaming bloody murder. I've never heard anyone scream in such agony before too. But then I hear a man's voice scream as well, and the dispatch tells me that other people have called the police, so they're on their way. It honestly sounds like the people are right in my yard, and my mum is awake at this point and comes to my room asking if I hear it too. Well, we finally get the courage to look out the window. It's just one woman. She's standing right under the streetlight near our yard and screaming. At points, she makes her voice deeper and kind of sound like a man, but it's just her. Her hair is tangled and she's wearing only shorts and a tank top in January. The police pull up about 2 minutes later and they're trying to pat her down, but every time they go to pat her down, she grabs at her pockets. Eventually, they just arrest her, and I know she probably just wasn't well or all there or perhaps even high, but it was honestly scary to say the least. I've never seen someone acting like that, and I've never heard someone in such agony like that before too. I don't know what was wrong with her or what happened to her after that, but I just cannot stop thinking about it. The way that she sounded, both as a man and as a woman, just didn't make sense to me. So let this be known before I start. We were kids and we had no idea about the paranormal at this time. However, my siblings and I had a Ouija board in our house. We had saw this trick that if you went into a dark, small space with the Ouija board and a mirror, you could see the ghost that you were talking to, apparently. Now, us being kids, I must have been 8 at the time, and we were excited to try it. So my brother, 14, my sister, 12, and my other sister, 11, and me all rushed to my brother's closet with a small flower mirror that we had. At first, we were just asking silly questions, normal kid stuff, like where are you, who are you, what's your name, etc. Me being the youngest, I was completely sure my older siblings were pulling a prank on me. I took my hands off and proceeded to accuse them of moving the planchette. My siblings then suggested that we all ask a question and then take our hands off to see if it moved. Being dumb kids, we asked, "Who do you want to kill?" Well, we all took our hands off and the planchette shot towards my brother. All of us, being extremely freaked out, ran to my dad to tell him, to which he then made us smash the board with a sledgehammer outside. It was a scary experience, and we definitely didn't touch the glass, and there's just no explanation for how it moved like that. We were in a closet. There was no wind, there was no slant in the closet, and there was just nothing that could have made it move like that. So, does anyone know what this experience could have been? Although I'm super interested in the paranormal, I do not know a lot of information about it. This whole thing, though, has haunted me since I was a kid, and I'm glad that I finally get to share it here, and I would love to hear what you guys think. In 2020, I met this guy at a mall that I worked at. He owned one of the stores at the mall, and it was a tech store to repair phones. But I would see him often because the office was close to his store, to be specific actually, right across from each other. And one day he came up to me and asked for my name, and we made small talk and we exchanged numbers. We started seeing each other until one night I was so tired from work that I didn't want to go to dinner with him anymore. I'm a single mum and I get burned out easily, so I told him that I didn't want to go anymore, and he said, "No, get ready, I already made the reservations." I said flat out that no, I wasn't going because I was exhausted, and I'm the type to refuse to be forced into doing anything, and being controlling is such a turn-off, so I was already getting ready to dump him. I said no firmly, and he responded saying that I'm on my way, and I said, well, I'm not going, so waste your gas if you want to. I didn't think that he would actually come, but of course, he did. He showed up at my apartment and was non-stop honking outside. He was calling and texting me non-stop while honking, and I threatened to call the cops, and he didn't stop. I called the cops for a noise complaint, and as soon as he heard the sirens, he sped off. Now, I remember waking up the next morning to 60 text messages and 100 missed calls saying that I can't believe you stood me up. I love you, and what is wrong with you? I just wanted to spend time with you. The list goes on, but it really made me see him in a different, weird, creepy light, because how do you love me if we've only been dating for like 2 months? We weren't in a relationship at all, at least in my eyes we weren't. Yes, we did get it on already after the first 2 weeks of seeing each other, but what scared me was I remember when after we had done that, he said that he was a virgin. I'm starting to believe that he actually was too, because of just how things started to escalate. But after he told me that, I didn't have intercourse with him again. So out of the 2 months, we only had intercourse once. He's a Muslim and his parents are very strict, and they're very on to him about whether or not he would sneak out to see me all the time, even though he was 24 at that moment. But after that night of him honking, I broke it off with him and called him a psycho. I told him that I don't ever want to see him again. So now, we're obviously in 2023, and ever since 2020 to now, he goes through weird mental states where, in certain months, he'll blow up my phone, but he'll do it once out of like 6 months basically, just out of the blue, and I never respond. Until one day in October, he sent an apology saying, "I'm sorry, I've moved on. I know that I was acting crazy and blah blah blah," and that he wanted to be on good terms as friends, and asked if he can take me to dinner to make up for what he's done. I thought that he was being honest because I hadn't heard from him in months, and I said okay, so I went to dinner with him. But that was the biggest mistake of my life, because before we got the food, he literally got on his knees and begged for me to never leave him again, and that he was in love with me. I've never been so scared or freaked out in my life, and I just ate in silence to keep my cool and stood silent because I didn't know what he was capable of anymore, and I didn't want him to snap or something. Eventually though, I said that I don't really feel good, so can I go home, and he drove me home. Once I got out of the car, I was so relieved and promised myself that I would never talk to him again, and I never did speak to him again. However, ever since October of 2022, he has been texting my phone once or twice a week asking to go to dinner, and I've never responded because he honestly just makes me sick to my stomach. I moved, thank God, so he doesn't know where I live, but recently he's been texting me to go to dinner again. The last text was December 30th, and the prior one was the week before that, and it's just been very consistent recently. But then, on Friday, January 6, 2023, 2 days ago, he took a picture of me while I was working and sent me the picture saying, "That's you." It scared me a lot because how the heck did he know where I worked? I mean, I just switched to a different salon and he didn't know the salon prior that I worked at. At least, I don't think he knew. I've only been at this salon for 2 or 3 weeks, and it makes no sense, and my heart dropped when I saw the picture, and I responded, "You're stalking me, leave me alone." And he said that he has a limo service and was driving around when no way in heck he could have seen me through the window because my station is the second station. He must have zoomed in to take the picture. There's a desk where he took the photo, so it's definitely really weird and creepy. I called the police and they basically victim blamed me and said, how do I know the guy that I dated and his last name or his home address and all that? They said, since I didn't know his last name or home address, I can't file a restraining order or order of protection. Honestly, I'm a bit lost as to what to do next, and I would really like some help. I know that the laws are different in every state, but I'm in Chicago, Illinois, and I don't know what he's capable of, so please, if you know what I should do or have any advice, then I would really love to hear from you.